Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, To the Bone, We Rise, written by Whispic. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, The Boy in the Green Hoodie. The rain came down in a slow, deliberate hush, the kind that seemed to fall in curtains rather than droplets. It muted the noise of the city, softened the corners of buildings, swallowed the buzz of old neon lights. On nights like this, Muzutafu didn't feel like a metropolis. It felt like an afterthought. Like the kind of place a person could disappear without anyone ever noticing they were gone. Aizawa Shoyuta stood on a rooftop above the older section of the city, soaked to the skin, the bitter wind slicing through his coat. The tail of his capture weapon coiled around his legs like a lazy cat, the fabric waterlogged but ready. His eyes narrowed beneath the curtain of wet black hair clinging to his face, sharp and focused on the alley below. A scuffle. Not loud enough to draw attention, but not quiet enough to go unnoticed. And now, silence. Then movement. A figure stepped back from the mouth of the alley, slow and unhurried, dragging breath behind him like it was something borrowed. The kid couldn't have been older than 15, 16 at the most. His green hoodie, oversized, threadbare, clung to him like a second skin, soaked dark with rain. His shoes were a disaster, one barely held together with black electrical tape, the other split at the heel. No umbrella. No bag. Aizawa watched him lower his arm. Something hit the ground with a wet, meaty slap, a man, unconscious and bleeding, jaw slack and crooked. Not dead. But not far from it. The boy didn't even look at him. He just turned his face toward the open street and paused. Not like he was considering escape. More like he was waiting. Aizawa dropped from the rooftop without a sound. He landed silently behind the boy, boots hitting the slick pavement with a splash that barely registered over the patter of the storm. The kid didn't turn, but Aizawa saw the subtle twitch of his shoulders, the way his spine went taut. "You've been active in this district for 3 weeks, Aizawa said, voice low and even. Unlicensed. Unregistered. No costume. No known quirk. Still no reaction. I could arrest you right now." At that, the boy finally turned. He moved like a cat half drowned and twice beaten, cautious, but never timid. His gaze met Aizawa's, and for a moment, something flickered there. Not fear. Recognition. Those eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone his age. Too hollow, too green. Not the kind of green you'd see in spring. The kind you'd see just under bruises. The kind of green that reminded Aizawa of how silence looked when it finally cracked. "You gonna?" the boy asked. His voice was raw. Unused. Worn at the edges like a scream held too long in the throat. But there was something else in it, too. A kind of detached curiosity. As if the answer didn't matter, he just wanted to hear which way this would go before deciding whether to fight. Aizawa studied him. "Depends. Got a name?" The boy looked away, like names were a kind of currency he hadn't used in years. "I'm not giving you that." Aizawa stepped forward once. The kid didn't back away. "That man," he gestured to the bleeding body slumped near a dumpster, "was twice your size. Your posture says street fighting. Your eyes say something worse." The boy shrugged one shoulder, lazy. He was dragging a girl into his van. She screamed. I was nearby. A beat. I don't chase what I don't have to. "And what do you call this?" Aizawa asked, nodding toward the aftermath. The boy didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, thick with something unspoken. The rain pressed down like a hand on the back of Aizawa's neck. "I call this," the boy said slowly, "cleaning up your mess." There it was. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Just a simple, brutal truth. Something bitter caught in Aizawa's throat. He swallowed it and stepped closer, close enough now to see the way the kid's left hand trembled, ever so slightly. Not from fear. From cold. And from not knowing what would happen next. "You're not a hero," Aizawa said. "No SHT," the boy muttered. "You're not a villain, either." A pause. The boy glanced at him, and this time, there was a shadow of something in his face. Not hope. But recognition. Like someone had finally used the right words. "Then what am I?" "You're a ghost," Aizawa said quietly. "But I'm not sure you started that way." The kid didn't resist when Aizawa said, "Come with me." He didn't nod, either. Just stood there, soaked through, the rain carving lines into his face that could have been tears if either of them had been willing to lie about it. Aizawa didn't touch him. Didn't offer a hand. He just turned and started walking through the rain, step steady, never looking back to check if he was being followed. And still, the kid came. They took the long way through the city. Not because Aizawa needed time to think, he already knew what he was doing. It was the kid. His pace was just slightly off from Aizawa's, like he wasn't used to walking next to someone. Like walking beside meant being seen, and being seen meant being vulnerable. It reminded Aizawa of animals that survived by staying in the corners of the world. Rats in the subway. Alley cats with ribs like shadows. Dogs that didn't bark because they learned early that sound could get you killed. The kid made no sound. No complaints. No questions. His left shoe squeaked every fourth step, but he didn't seem to notice. By the time they reached Aizawa's apartment, the sky had gone from storm gray to that peculiar color of black that cities get when the power grid isn't sure if it wants to short out or hold on. Aizawa punched in the code on the door. The hallway light buzzed overhead. The moment the door opened, warm air and the smell of leftover tea greeted them. The boy hesitated on the threshold. "Inside," Aizawa said, gently. "Not an order." The boy stepped in like he was waiting for the ground to fall out beneath him. It wasn't much. The apartment was sparsely furnished. Couch, low table, a bookshelf mostly filled with case files and bandaged notebooks. A worn kettle sat on the stove like it had been forgotten halfway through an attempt at normalcy. The kid stood in the middle of it all, dripping onto the hardwood, arms tucked in close like he wasn't sure what parts of himself he was allowed to take up space with. "Bathrooms through there," Aizawa said, nodding toward a narrow hallway. "Towels clean. Clothes might not fit, but they're dry." Still, the boy didn't move. "Do you need me to show you?" That broke it. The boy shook his head once, fast, embarrassed, and vanished down the hall. The water turned on 5 minutes later. And ran for 37 straight. Aizawa sat on the edge of the couch, his hair still dripping into the collar of his coat. He didn't dry off. Didn't pour tea. Just listened to the water. Listened for signs of motion. Collapse. Panic. None came. When the boy emerged again, he was wearing an old black t-shirt that hung off his shoulders like a shroud and a pair of sweatpants knotted tight at the waist. His hair, dark and curling now that it was clean, dripped onto his forehead. His face looked younger without the dirt. Not young. Just younger. Still too thin. Still too quiet. But he looked less like something the city had chewed up and spit out. And more like a boy who hadn't had the chance to be one. "You eat?" Aizawa asked. The kid blinked. It was a strange question, apparently. "Not lately." "Do you want to?" A shrug. It could have meant yes. Could have meant I don't know what hunger is anymore. Aizawa stood and moved to the kitchen anyway. Mick's influence lived here, even in the fridge. There were sealed containers with stickers on the lids. Some labeled Monday. Others just said show, don't forget. Most had cartoon drawings of cats. Aizawa pulled out soba, reheated it with mechanical ease, and set the bowl in front of the boy without comment. He didn't watch him eat. Just sat back on the couch, sipping lukewarm tea and letting the silence unfold like a blanket. It took 10 minutes for the boy to speak. "I'm not staying." "I know," Aizawa said. "I just needed somewhere to be for a second." "That's allowed." The boy's jaw twitched. "No one told me that before." The rain had softened by the time the clock on Aizawa's wall clicked past midnight. The boy, he still hadn't offered a name, sat curled on one corner of the couch like he expected someone to kick him off any second. His fingers gripped the edge of the cushion. Not tightly. Just enough that Aizawa noticed he hadn't let go since he sat down. The empty bowl sat on the low table in front of him, clean except for a trace of broth around the rim. "Do you have a place to sleep?" Aizawa asked, quiet enough that it didn't feel like a confrontation. The boy's eyes flicked up. Green, even in the low light. Less glassy now. But still guarded. "Sometimes," he said. "Where?" He shrugged, like the question didn't deserve a real answer. "Places." Aizawa let the silence stretch for a moment, then stood. He walked to the hallway cabinet, pulled out a spare pillow, a folded blanket, and returned without speaking. He placed them on the far end of the couch, close, but not close enough to trap him. The boy looked at them like they might vanish if he blinked. "I'm not keeping you," Aizawa said. "I'm offering." The kid nodded once. Not grateful. Not defensive. Just surprised. Later, as Aizawa cleaned the kitchen in slow, absent movements, he heard the boy shuffle across the room. Not toward the door. Not toward the hallway. Toward the bookshelf. It wasn't anything special, most of it was casework, a few well-worn paperbacks, a stack of journals so overstuffed with post-it notes they looked like they were growing new limbs. But there, near the edge of the top shelf, was a photo frame. The boy didn't pick it up. He didn't touch anything. But Aizawa saw the way he looked at it, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "It's my first class," Aizawa said. "Graduated 5 years ago." The kid didn't speak. "Some of them are heroes now. One's working in the support industry. 2 joined HPSC, before I cut ties." Still no response. Then, very quietly, "You remembered them." Aizawa blinked. Of course. They weren't erased. There was a weight to those words. Not envy. Something deeper. A sadness so practiced it no longer showed on his face, only in the way he stood, like the frame of his body had been built crooked to survive whatever world raised him. "No," Aizawa said carefully. "They weren't." The boy turned away from the shelf. His hoodie sleeves were too long, now that the jacket was drying in the hallway. He pushed them up halfway, revealing wrists marked with faded, healing scrapes. "Not recent. Not accidental." "You worked with kids like me?" he asked, tone unreadable. "I've worked with all kinds. Even ones the system forgot." Aizawa didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said, "I once had a student who lived out of an abandoned laundromat for 3 years. Another one who stole meds from clinics to get through withdrawal. One ran away twice before I stopped reporting them." The boy didn't move. But his breath caught. "Did they make it?" "Some of them. The ones who had help." The boy looked at him then, really looked. Something cracked, just slightly, in the corner of his expression. Not a smile. Not even relief. Just the smallest flicker of belief that someone might know the shape of his story before he spoke it aloud. "I was on a tour once," he said suddenly. "With other quirkless kids. A hero school hosted us. They said we mattered." His voice didn't break. But Aizawa felt it in his ribs anyway. "UA," the boy added, so quietly it was almost a question. Aizawa didn't flinch. "Do you remember a green hoodie?" the boy asked. 10 years old. Didn't ask questions. Didn't talk. Stayed in the back. Aizawa opened his mouth. Stopped. Thought back. Carefully. The tour. The list. The head count that came up short, once. He had been told the boy had left early with a parent. He had believed them. No one noticed, the boy said. I did, Aizawa said, finally. And that made the boy look away, as if the words had done more damage than being forgotten ever could. The rain had stopped sometime around 2 in the morning. The silence it left behind was thick and tender, clinging to the walls like smoke after a kitchen fire, present, but afraid to settle. Aizawa stayed awake. He didn't hover, didn't watch the boy like a hawk. Just existed in the space. Present but unintrusive. The way you'd stay near a wounded animal who hadn't decided yet whether to bolt or breathe. He brewed tea. Left a cup near the couch with a folded napkin beneath it. The kind of offering you didn't speak about. A quiet way of saying you are allowed to be here without demanding a thank you. The boy hadn't said anything else since the photo. He hadn't touched the tea. But he hadn't left either. Aizawa eventually moved to his chair by the window, the one with the frayed armrest and the creak in the leg that Hisashi kept threatening to fix. It overlooked the city's old district, cracked rooftops, uneven gutters, a skyline that glowed a little more orange than gold. He didn't ask the boy to sleep. Didn't expect him to. He waited. And when the boy spoke again, it was barely louder than breath. My name's Izuku. The syllables hung there, suspended. Aizawa didn't move. Izuku Midoriya. Like it hurt to say it. Like it might not be true if he said it wrong. I was declared quirkless at 4, Izuku said. Inko, that's my mom, she didn't take it well. She didn't yell. Didn't cry. Just kind of, stopped looking at me. Aizawa turned slightly, just enough to show he was listening, not looming. I stayed quiet, Izuku continued. Tried to be good. Tried to be useful. Thought if I smiled enough or got the best grades, maybe it would fix something. He laughed once. It was a small, ugly sound. But it didn't. And when I disappeared on that tour, she told the school I went home early. Told the system I moved in with my dad. Did you? Aizawa asked. Izuku shook his head. Don't even know his name. There was a pause. The kind that comes after truth. Not the kind that demands a response. Just the kind that waits to see what breaks next. You were erased, Aizawa said softly. Izuku didn't answer. You were failed. By the system. By your school. By every adult who should have seen you and didn't. Still no answer. Aizawa's voice didn't waver. I'm seeing you now. Izuku swallowed. Hard. He wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand, not crying. Just catching something before it could fall. I didn't want to matter anymore, he whispered. I just wanted to hurt people who looked at kids like they were disposable. Aizawa nodded once. That's not villainy, he said. That's grief. The light from the city made Izuku's skin look ghostly, all sharp lines and faded edges. Like he was still halfway invisible and hadn't quite decided if he wanted to come back into focus. I don't know how to be a person anymore, he admitted. Not really. You don't have to be, Aizawa said. Izuku's brow furrowed. What? You don't have to be anything, Aizawa clarified. Not yet. You just have to exist. I don't know how to do that either. Then we'll start there. Silence again. But this time it was warmer. Not the kind that followed punishment. The kind that came after something heavy had been set down. Aizawa stood and crossed the room to a side shelf. He pulled a small object from the drawer, smooth and rectangular, wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Izuku without a word. The boy unwrapped it. It was an old, unused UA student ID. Blank. No name. No photo. Just the crest. The weight. The possibility. I'm not offering you a desk, Aizawa said. Not yet. Izuku didn't look up. But I'm offering you a place. Somewhere that remembers your name, even if you forget it. Izuku stared at the ID for a long time. Then, very slowly, he nodded. Not acceptance. Not yet. But belief. And in a city that had forgotten him 100 times over, that was a beginning. Chapter 2, A Ghost in the System. It was still early when Aizawa woke, but the city was already breathing beneath the windows. The rhythmic patter of the rain tapped lazily on the glass now, softer than it had been the night before, where it had come down in a torrent, pounding like an angry drum. Not a storm, just a quiet reminder that some things hadn't finished falling yet. The gray sky hung low, shrouding the city in a misty veil, blurring the outlines of the buildings beyond the glass. He sat in the chair he hadn't moved from since the night before, his neck stiff and knotted, knees aching from the discomfort of prolonged stillness. Aizawa stretched briefly, trying to dislodge the stiffness, but the effort only reminded him how long he'd been up, how much he had fought to keep watch. The pillow he had propped against the chair gave little comfort, and his eyes felt heavy with the weight of sleeplessness and worry. On the couch, Midoriya Izuku, because he had a name now, was asleep. Or perhaps just trying to be. The boy lay curled beneath the blanket Aizawa had given him, a tattered quilt that had seen better days but offered warmth nonetheless. One arm was tucked beneath his pillow, while the other was braced across his chest, fingers curled protectively as if trying to shield his own heart from the world outside. His face, usually so animated, so full of fervent emotion, was now softened by sleep. Yet, there was something about the way he lay that hinted at underlying tension, like he didn't trust the rise and fall of his own breathing. Aizawa didn't move. Didn't wake him. He just watched, a sentry in the dim light of dawn. The couch was too big for the boy's slight frame, and he looked so small, so vulnerable, tucked into that blanket, as if trying to disappear, merge into the fabric, lost in the folds of the anxiety that clung to him like mist on a morning walk. For a man who had seen dozens of students sleep through lectures, combat classes, and near-death final exams, this was the first time he'd seen someone sleep like they were afraid of being caught. He rose only when the sun crept far enough into the window to dust the blanket with golden light. The soft glow illuminated the edges of the room, transforming the dreary ambience into something warmer, albeit fleeting. Quietly, carefully, he made his way to the kitchen, stepping over the creaky old floorboards that were all too familiar to him. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air from the previous night, yet he craved something warm and strong to kickstart his day. Coffee first. Then files. The quiet of the apartment was a cocoon, insulating him from the bustling world outside where sirens blared and cars honked, where the streets shimmered with raindrops like a sea of diamonds. He didn't expect to find anything. Not really, but still a flicker of hope urged him on. So, he opened the laptop anyway and began to dig through the files, his fingers working over the keys with the deftness of long practice. It didn't take long for the red flags to start piling up. Midoriya Izuku, the screen read, a name that felt both foreign and strangely NTMT. DOB, unknown status, deregistered quirk, NA last recorded schooling, Aldera Elementary, quirkless track, withdrawal date, no reason listed guardian, Inko Midoriya case notes, none welfare check, incomplete medical records, none past age 10. Aizawa's frown deepened, his brow knitting together. This was bad. Even quieter kids had more digital footprint than this. The erasure wasn't just administrative, it was surgical. The kind of deletion that took access and intent, the kind undertaken by someone with considerable power. A very deliberate removal. Someone had wanted this boy gone. Not just physically. Systemically. He sat back and ran a hand through his hair, the strands still damp from last night's rain. The cold weight began to settle in his gut as if a storm cloud had taken residence in his very core. He knew what this meant. He'd seen it before, files scrubbed by commission interns looking to hide failures, or parents paying to cover records. But this wasn't some paper-shuffling mistake, this was a ghost story. The kind that began with a child's name, so full of potential, and ended with an empty room and nobody asking why. He didn't hear Izuku get up, lost as he was in thought, staring at the flickering cursor on the screen. But when he turned, the boy was there, silent, barefoot, the fabric of his hoodie bunched awkwardly around his fists, too large for his slight frame. The subdued morning light illuminated the contours of his face, revealing a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, like a deer caught in the headlights. His big, green eyes flicked to the laptop, wide with something that might have been fear or determination, it was hard to tell. Aizawa didn't close it. Didn't hide it. He knew the boy deserved the honesty of this moment. The painful truth was necessary, even at the risk of breaking the fragile bond they had begun to forge. He let the boy see, willing to share this burden, understanding that small act could shift something in the air between them, could carve out a path forward amid the shadows of deceit that loomed ominously around Izuku's past. "Are you okay?" Aizawa asked softly, his voice a gravelly whisper against the stillness of the room. He didn't want to push, he'd seen enough of kids breaking, seen enough of them startle at shadows. Yet he knew he had to gauge the boy's reaction, to understand what lay beneath the surface of those anxious eyes. The city never really went quiet. Even on gray mornings like this one, after the rain had pulled everything into soft focus and the clouds hadn't moved on yet, there was always noise. Not sharp, not loud. Just constant. Tires over puddles. Old heating units whirring to life. The shuffle of someone unlocking a storefront 2 hours too early. Aizawa stood in the kitchen, barefoot, mug warming the space between his hands. The couch behind him made the smallest sound. A rustle. A breath. He didn't turn. Not yet. Not because he didn't care, but because he did, and he knew that looking too fast, too directly, would startle the boy out of this thin stretch of almost safety. Izuku Midoriya. He had a name now. A history. A file that Aizawa couldn't open without wading through redacted notes and half-deleted system strings. It had taken him less than 10 minutes to find the gaps. Which said more about the gaps than his own skill. You couldn't delete a child from government records without someone's permission. Not all the way. Not like this. There were always fingerprints left behind, little bureaucratic scars that whispered, someone tried to make this person vanish. Izuku moved slowly now, a shadow draped in oversized hoodie sleeves that swamped his thin frame, sweatpants knotted loosely around hips that still seemed too small for his growing body. His feet whispered against the cool hardwood floor, a careful rhythm practice to evade sound. The kind of quiet that whispered of hardship, of caution, a lifetime of navigating a world filled with stares and judgment, learning that silence could often shield wounds far deeper than any blow. He stood near the edge of the table, anchored by an invisible weight, staring at the flickering glow of the laptop that illuminated the dim room. Aizawa, his mentor, his protector, hadn't touched it since the previous night. The search window was still wide open, a chilling portal into memories thought buried but not forgotten. Izuku's gaze fell to the screen and went still. Those raw words, numbers, and sterile documents filled him with a numb ache. He'd spent a lifetime drowning in shadows cast by the inadequacies of an unyielding world. A conditional society that tried its hardest to erase the definition of himself. His shoulders felt heavy, not in a way that spoke of relaxation but rather the sense of a new, cruel burden. It was as if the weight of invisible chains rattled within him, locking his spirit tighter into the confines of despair. "Is that me?" His voice emerged softer than he intended, a whisper barely breaking the silence, almost apologetic, as if he feared the truth behind the question lived somewhere between the lines. "Yes," Aizawa responded, but the familiarity in his tone did little to ease the anguish lying dormant beneath Izuku's surface. Izuku didn't move closer to inspect the screen, nor did he step back. Instead, he lingered in the harvest of his own raw emotion, fear worming its way between disbelief and the painful remembrance of years spent lurking in pain, invisible to those who should have cared. "You found it fast," he said, trying to match the steadiness in his voice, but it trembled just beyond the edge. Aizawa breathed, his expression deceptively calm but filled with an unspoken bond of understanding, a connection only fostered through the cruelty of unshared experiences. "You were never really gone," he replied. "Just buried." With that, the silence that followed felt heavier than guilt. Izuku could sense it, a cold, invisible pressure wrapping around the walls like a vice, suffocating every flicker of hope that dared to linger in the air. He turned his gaze back to the screen, where the impersonal lines of data sprawled out before him like a lifeless tableau. No medical records. No behavioral incidents. No follow-up. Aldera Elementary, quirkless, withdrawn. Inko Midoriya, no contact. Nothing about the data screamed. Nothing accused. The words hung there like the finality of a headstone, devoid of names or numbers or anything that could fade. It was worse than the clanging of silence, far colder than the unfeeling void of absence. It felt like abandonment. Izuku reached out, fingers hovering over the touchpad. His breath caught in his throat. He felt as if he were teetering on the edge of a chasm, uncertain of whether to leap or retreat. Then his fingers cursed softly to his side again. "I used to wonder if maybe I'd never existed at all," he said, his words casual yet laden with a quiet despair. "Like maybe I was some dream she had and forgot to wake up from." The truth settled between them, thick and suffocating. Aizawa remained silent, choosing instead to hold to the gravity of the moment. There were no right things to say, not when faced with direct realities that bit at the very fiber of Izuku's existence. So Aizawa asked, "Do you want to see the rest?" Izuku hesitated, the tremors of his heart fluttering like unforeseen butterflies. Then he nodded, letting the silence guide his choices. Aizawa pulled the file up, setting it against the glow of the screen as Izuku fixed his gaze upon it. There wasn't much. A photograph, a blurry, scanned image from a school ID, captured in an age where childhood was still fragile. 9 years old, with a green hoodie zipped up to the neck, the expression on his face tight, lips pressed into a near smile. If one looked closely, the anguish in Izuku's own soul was reflected back, a boy wishing so desperately to belong, trapped in a body that quietly screamed for acceptance. Next came a withdrawal form. One signature. No attached report. No medical justification. No transfer. No custody dispute. Just stark words that read, "Guardian assumes full responsibility. Quirkless education no longer needed." Izuku read it once. Then again. His breathing quickened, but he didn't speak, the weight of it choked him. He simply reached forward and clicked the document closed as if it had stung him. And Aizawa didn't stop him. Aizawa understood that sometimes the act of closing a chapter was so incredibly painful that all one could do was bear the burden in silence. Aizawa's heart raced as he contemplated the implications, wanting more than ever to scream, to rage against a system designed to protect and yet suffocated innocence instead. He couldn't call the commission, he already knew what they would say. Their glib reassurances would fall on deaf ears, "There's no record of negligence. The file must have been sealed. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, they wouldn't care." So, he called Kaido Akemi, the only person he knew who understood the grief and horror that lurked beneath the surface of the sanitized reports. She met him at a quiet cafe on the west side of Mizurufu, tucked away among fogged windows and empty coffee cups. It was a space shrouded in anonymity, perfect for whispered confessions that danced dangerously close to danger. When Aizawa entered, Kaido was already seated, black coffee untouched, as if the warmth within would only sear the truth deeper into memory. Her hair had lost some of its vibrancy since they last met, streaks of gray shimmering through, echoes of sleepless nights passed in worry and heartbreak. But her eyes, those once bright eyes, held a flickerless emptiness now, a sorrow that bespoke of understanding pain. "Aizawa," she greeted. "Akemi." His voice was steady, the practiced calm barely masking the urgency boiling just beneath the surface. He didn't waste time. "I have a name," he said, the weight of the revelation pressing on his tongue. She didn't flinch. "Let me guess," she replied softly, sadness entwined in her voice. "Midoriya." He nodded, affirmation burying itself deep within him. She closed her eyes, a slight tremor rippling across her lips. God. He knew all too well where this was heading. "You knew." "I suspected," she said, voice taut with regret. "But it was buried so deep I didn't know if I'd made him up in some desperate wish to save a soft boy from the world." A heavy pause fell between them. "I filed a welfare check," she admitted, and the words tightened Aizawa's chest, brewing dark memories of the system's failure. "I read the file." "There wasn't one," she replied. "Because someone pulled it." Aizawa's jaw tightened, fingers curling around the edges of the table, digging into the wood, aching frustration coursed through him like lava. Kaito opened her bag and slid out a folder. False hope. The paper itself felt heavy in the atmosphere, dragging the air beneath its weight. "I started keeping hard copies," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "After the Todoroki case." He didn't dare ask which one, it wasn't worth the weight of the unspoken agony that loomed above them. Kaito flipped it open, paper crinkling like the whisper of a fragility they both understood intimately. Inside, the printed quirkless registry application, pale remnants of a child's existence reduced to bureaucratic insignificance. A behavioral assessment read, "Withdrawn, quiet, highly intelligent, low interaction." A handwritten note in the margins, "Mother's tone distant. Child observed flinching." Aizawa absorbed it all, his heart heavy with the cruel hegemony of their shared world. He read it again, twice, trying to reconcile his own sense of the truth with those cruel words etched with apathy. "You tried." "I did," she replied quietly, tears pooling in her eyes. "And someone made it disappear." Back at the apartment, Izuku found himself seated on the floor with his back against the couch, knees drawn to his chest like he was trying to hold the pieces of himself together that still felt splintered within. He wasn't reading. He wasn't even looking at anything, he was simply existing. When Aizawa returned, Izuku didn't rise. Didn't speak. Their bond was forged in the rhythm of shared silence, in those spaces that were abuzz with unvoiced concern and understanding. Aizawa placed the folder on the table beside him. "I found someone who remembered." Izuku didn't move. He didn't respond in kind. "I didn't think anyone did," he murmured, the words soaking into the hollow of his heart. For the first time, Aizawa saw the cracks that radiated out from where Izuku sat, how it all spiraled deeper with each moment that passed. "I didn't think I was worth remembering." The confession hung there, heavy like a stone pressing into their shared vulnerability. The first time Aizawa heard the name Inko Midoriya spoken aloud, it was by Kaito, her voice laced with fear and hesitation, as if invoking the name might awaken something foul from the ground beneath them. The second time, it tumbled from his own lips. Out loud. Into the phone. "Inko Midoriya," he said, watching the world fade into darkness as he sought a thread of strength to tether the moment to reality. Her voice was soft over the line, a hushed breath that quivered against silence, clipped yet infinitely weary. "This is Shoyuta Aizawa," he introduced, speaking to both break the silent void and avoid the tempest that roiled beneath the surface. "We've never met. I'm a teacher at UA. A hero." A pause lingered between them, oppressive yet necessary. "All right," she replied calmly, devoid of emotion. "You had a son," he stated, each syllable heavy enough to drop into depths as cold as ice. Another pause swallowed him whole, a darkness that lingered too long, stretching into eternity. "I had a child," she finally replied. Past tense. Aizawa's heart lurched in his chest, clenching painfully against the bitter sting of truth. "He's not dead. Isn't he?" She replied too easily, a casual dismissal that ignited flames of frustration within him. Izuku is alive, he insisted, the tremor in his voice threading through the line. He was removed from every system, abandoned. Forgotten. But not erased. He remembers. He could sense the silence on the other end, growing colder with each second. I see. That was all she offered, a dismissal that felt like ash raining down on everything Aizawa had fought to keep intact. That's all you have to say? He pressed, disbelief cracking through his composure. I did what I thought was safest, she replied, voice serenely calm, oblivious to the rising tide of anger in Aizawa's veins. For who? He asked, the question sharp enough to cut. She faltered this time, providing nothing. Instead, she simply replied, he was a soft boy. The world isn't kind to soft boys. And you thought killing him quietly was mercy. He bit back the growing rage, each word a dagger he forced through restraint. You didn't care at all. No, she said curtly, I thought he'd disappear quietly. Aizawa hung up without a goodbye, the sound of the disconnect echoing sharply in the silence that followed his words. When he stepped back into the living room, Izuku was seated on the couch, one leg drawn beneath him, and his expression guarded. When Aizawa entered, he looked up, calm, but there was that same looming weight in the air, as if he already knew. She doesn't want you, Aizawa said, keeping his voice steadier than the turmoil wrenching inside him, because lying would be worse, and Izuku deserved the truth. He only nodded, acceptance cloaked in resignation. I didn't expect her to. He didn't say it with venom or bitterness. Just the dull, gritty obstacle of acceptance curdled in Izuku's chest like spoiled milk. But Aizawa wasn't fooled. He caught the way Izuku's hand curled against the blanket like someone had turned gravity up inside him, pressing all the weight of the world against his heart, a reminder of abandonment, a gaping chasm where love should dwell. You're not the one who disappeared, Aizawa said. I know, Izuku murmured, voice barely rising above the weight of the moment. You're not the one who left. I know. But you still think it's your fault. Izuku didn't respond, a silent admission hanging heavy in the air that said more than words could ever convey. That was enough of an answer. Aizawa planted himself on the edge of the couch, his knees just shy of brushing the coffee table, mug of now cold tea cradled in both hands, fingers tightly woven around its warmth. He didn't speak, a powerful presence of quiet waiting for his words to surface, ruminating in the storm swirling within the boy beside him. Across from him, Izuku sat curled into one side of the couch, shoulders hunched in, elbows pressed to his ribs, and though his eyes were open and fixed on the far wall, it felt as though he weren't really looking at anything. It was bracing, an instinctive reaction born from years of hurt and punishment, born from too many moments of being pushed down for simply existing. I talked to her, Aizawa finally said, quiet and devoid of pressure. No accusations, just a statement threading a line through the tension suspended between them. Izuku didn't react outwardly, no visible sigh, no shift, no broken expression. But Aizawa wasn't fooled. He caught that slight twitch in Izuku's fingers, as if they wanted to curl into a fist for protection but instead sought comfort. She said you were too soft, Aizawa continued, watching Izuku's lips tremble slightly. That the world wouldn't be kind to you. A long silence filled the space like a shroud, thick and unyielding. Then Izuku whispered, so softly it broke through the void, she was right. No, Aizawa countered, disbelief cracking through the surface. Izuku blinked, confusion threading its way into his gaze, doubt tangling with the tinges of agreed-upon despair. Aizawa held his gaze steady, refusing to yield to the weight of Izuku's sorrow. You weren't soft. You were unguarded. And people hurt you for it. That's not softness. That's bravery. Izuku's lips parted slightly, surprise pressing against the tears pooling behind his eyes. For the first time, the walls seemed to creak beneath the weight of slow acknowledgement, exposing the vulnerabilities he hid even from himself. You can be soft now, Aizawa leaned in, urgency bleeding warmth into his voice. If you want. Or hard. Or nothing at all. You don't owe anyone a shape. Izuku swallowed, searching for strength as emotions began to converge like a gathering storm. His voice broke slightly as he asked, why? Because no one should be punished for surviving. Izuku turned his head away, chin tucking down as if he were holding something back, wrestling with a tide of unwelcome feelings. Aizawa didn't press further. He waited, trusting that the building pressure would surface in its own time. Then he made a move. Every action was deliberate and slow, never intending to crowd or overwhelm. He reached out, not to touch, not to push, but to offer companionship. One hand, palm up, resting between them on the couch cushion, out in the open. Izuku's gaze shifted to him, staring long and hard at the outstretched hand. A labyrinth of emotions wrestled within him, tension and longing, doubt and fear, it all twisted together like brambles clawing at his heart. This moment felt like both a test and a revelation, and Izuku's instincts screamed against the vulnerability he yearned to embrace. But Aizawa stayed still, allowing Izuku to exist at this threshold on his own terms. Then it happened. It took a full minute. Then another. Finally, Izuku flinched. The barely perceptible recoil broke through the uncertainty that tethered him to the ground. It was an instinct buried deep within him, an echo of past trauma that warned him against trusting, that whispered, "This is a trick." And yet, with that fearful flinch came an inextinguishable pull. He reached forward anyway. Slowly. Shakily. Tracking the movement like a heart in a fragile birdcage, he didn't take Aizawa's hand. He simply touched it, just the side of it, fingers grazing against skin, like that was all he could allow himself. Just enough contact to remind himself that the world had not ended in isolation, just enough clasp to affirm that he was, at the very least, still here. Aizawa didn't close his fingers. He didn't grip or seize the moment. Instead, he let it breathe. He let the fear exist next to something kind, something real. Izuku exhaled, a sound full of cracks and breaks like something inside him had finally come undone. With a voice trembling like leaves caught in a wind, he murmured, "I didn't think anyone would wait." And in that moment, the pain of all he had lost melted into a profound understanding of resilience. It became a question of patience, not just from Aizawa but from the universe that had so harshly abandoned him. The intimacy of that moment forged something unbreakable, an unyielding promise that he was more than the absence of recognition, he was steady, unguarded, and very much alive. Together, they lingered in a silence that now functioned like a soft blanket, where pain and warmth intertwined, weaving together the strands of their shared existence. Though the world was often unkind, filled with sharp edges that threatened to tear them apart, tonight, standing here, they understood that they were not alone. And perhaps, for the first time, that knowledge was enough to sustain them both. Chapter 3, Tooth and Claw. It was supposed to be a low-risk patrol. Just another night where duty and apprehension intertwined like shadows against flickering streetlights. No more than 2 hours in a residential district near the West Rail Line, half-empty apartments, the sullen remains of once vibrant shopfronts, and a chorus of shuttered businesses that filled the air with a palpable sense of defeat. It felt like a city bleeding out through its cracks. Izuku Midoriya walked half a step behind his mentor, Shoyuta Aizawa, his hood pulled up, shoulders low in a defensive posture instinctively honed by years of navigating unsafe spaces. His eyes darted between the windows lining the street, scanning them like they were gun barrels trained on him. He didn't ask why this was the place Aizawa had chosen. They both understood the weight of silence, it had a language of its own, whispered in the shadows that drifted along these desolate hallways of broken dreams. This was where the system frayed. Where invisible kids vanished. Where no one called the police because they knew better than to believe anyone would come. It was a barren landscape populated by the ghosts of those left behind, the whispers of the lost echoing in every crack and crevice. Aizawa said little as always, his words clipped and practical. A seasoned sentinel standing guard against the rising tide of darkness. Blind corner there, he noted, his voice low but authoritative. Notice the warped streetlight, it's been out for weeks. Here, shortcut alley, but no exits. Trap zone. Izuku nodded each time, committing everything to memory, as if the knowledge he gathered could be used to stitch the frayed seams of this broken place back together. He didn't speak. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't know how to articulate this glooming sense of despair without giving away something vulnerable and dangerous, something unguarded that would expose him. This neighborhood reminded him of too many things: the places he used to sleep between the cracks of decaying buildings, the rusted fences he would hop over for a moment of peace, the windows he'd peek through while watching other people find warmth and safety. He didn't belong on this side of the patrol line, he belonged in the shadows behind it, haunting the passages of his haunted past, tethered forever to the weight of his memories. They walked past an old bakery, boarded shut, its awning sagging under layers of neglect, an open fuse box sparking slightly from the last storm. The aroma of stale bread lingered in the air, a bitter reminder of what had once been. A man outside the bar 2 doors down looked up, momentarily halting his conversation with another rough character lingering outside. His eyes narrowed in recognition, then paused longer upon Izuku, absorbing him like a wound that wouldn't heal. Didn't think ghosts needed tour guides, the man spat at Izuku's feet, venom dripping from his words. Izuku didn't flinch, but he felt the anger simmer beneath the surface of his skin like fire liking at the edges of his composure. Aizawa didn't stop walking, but Izuku could sense the tension in his shoulders, just slightly shifting, ready to protect but also disgusted by the memory of what had happened here. The man didn't follow. He didn't press. But his gaze lingered, like a predator assessing prey. All the way down the block. Later, when they stopped beneath a flickering streetlight, its dim illumination perhaps the only thing left of a forgotten promise, Aizawa pointed out the best angle for cover if they were attacked from the left. It felt routine, yet heavy, and Izuku finally broke the silence with a single query that lodged itself in the still air. Why here? Aizawa raised an eyebrow, the shadows deepening across his face. You know why, he muttered. Because they're scared of me, Izuku replied, anger prickling at the edges of his awareness, raw and stinging. Because they remember you, Aizawa corrected, his voice devoid of judgment but thick with weight. Fear is memory that never got closure. Izuku looked down at his hands, curled in tight fists, feeling the way his pulse thudded against his skin. He hadn't thrown a punch in hours, but his knuckles still felt raw, just a reminder of the violence and inevitability that clung to his being like a permanent tattoo he could never escape. They were only 10 minutes from heading back when they heard it, a scream. Sharp. Close. Female. Aizawa turned sharply, already moving with that instinct honed by years of field experience. The urgency screamed through the air like a fiery arrow striking the heart, and Izuku followed him, lungs kicking into gear before his mind fully grasped what was happening. They found her in a back alley, barely a teenager, shaking, palms scraped raw, one shoe missing. The fear radiating from her was almost tangible, devouring the space around them. Panic and rage bubbled over as she pointed frantically toward the deep bend of the alley. He grabbed my bag, he had a knife, Aizawa didn't hesitate. Stay with her, he told Izuku firmly. I can go, Izuku insisted. The plea came out more like a command, birthed from instinct and an undeniable drive to help, no matter the cost. Aizawa looked at him. Really looked. The hesitation lasted 1 second too long. That's all it took. Izuku was already moving. The alley morphed into a textbook nightmare, a place that seemed to breathe suffocating darkness, narrow and claustrophobic. Trash bins upturned lay scattered around, a scattering of refuse that concealed secrets beneath layers of neglect. The strobe light flickering above made everything feel distorted, and the cracked pavement invited shadows back into the world. Graffiti splattered across the walls whispered untold stories, half covered by fresh layers of pain, marking this space as a forgotten battleground. The man wasn't hard to find. The sharp edge of adrenaline coiled in Izuku's gut, urging him on. Tall, hood pulled tight against the fading light. Knife still in hand, he ran like he knew no one would follow him this far, lost in an abyss resembling his former self, lost in the oblivion of desperation. He didn't expect the green blur that caught his shoulder mid-stride, slamming him into the wall hard enough to make the alley tremble. "Drop it," Izuku ordered, voice low but steady, a scream beneath the calm exterior that masked the storm inside. The man snarled defiantly, raising the blade in a threatening arc, a move born out of fear, perhaps, but propelled by defiance. Izuku didn't think. His body reacted with the fluidity born of instinct and desperation. He kicked the inside of the man's wrist, fast and precise. The blade clattered, a momentary reprieve from the danger circling above them like hungry vultures. Then the man, foolish and slow, lunged forward. Izuku moved like smoke, swift and instinctive, fueled by a fire ignited in the chambers of a soul all too familiar with violence. He ducked low, spun, knee met gut, followed swiftly by an elbow crashing against the man's jaw. The man dropped. Hard. But Izuku didn't stop moving. Not right away. His hand was already pulling the man back up by the collar, adrenaline coursing through him as he readied to inflict another strike, but before he could unleash the dark tide brewing within him, a voice, low, urgent, cut through the alley like a blade forged from iron. "Midoriya Izuku." Izuku froze, just like that, caught between the end of instinct and obedience that had carved his reality for as long as he could remember. The man was unconscious, Izuku's breath came in tight bursts, not panicked. Just close. Close to something sharp. Close to something that felt hot and wrong, too familiar in a way he thought he had handled long ago. He let go and stood slowly, not daring to glance at Izuku, refusing to acknowledge the girl who was still shaking behind him. Instead, he stared down at his hands, trembling, coated in grime and unyielding memories of salvation and sorrow. Doubt clawed at him, relentless and suffocating. "How many times have you done this?" Izuku asked quietly, his voice carrying an echo of weary understanding. It was a question that hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a history long left unspoken. Izuku swallowed hard, staring at his hands, the tremors refusing to subside, fear coiling like a snake around his heart. "I don't know," he whispered eventually, his voice rough with unshed tears. "Not enough. Every time feels like some kind of weight I can't lift." A silence stretched between them, thick with unshared burdens and sadness. Izuku's gaze bore into him, deciphering the raw emotions hidden beneath layers of masculine bravado. He didn't need to say anything, Izuku could already hear the unvoiced worries, the fragility of the life they lived, the dangers that lurked in both shadows and light. The girl began to cry, a desperate, broken sound that sliced through the somber air, jarring Izuku from his internal turmoil. "I just wanted to go home," she sobbed, her small frame shaking and vulnerable, eliciting a visceral pain deep within his chest. He felt the weight of her heartache wrap around him like chains, sending jagged pulses of guilt through him, igniting memories from a past that clung far too closely with the grip of unsettling familiarity. "Hey," he murmured, crouching down slightly to meet her gaze. "You're safe now. You're okay." The words felt flimsy, but he needed her to know. The look in her eyes reminded him of all the kids he'd seen vanish, of the faces left abandoned in his own memories. The echoes of fear clung like fog on his mind, a burden he tried to shake yet could never truly escape. Tears continued to spill down her cheeks, the fear of that moment stringing tighter around her small shoulders. "I wanted to go to the market with my mom," she stammered, sniffling. "I didn't even want to be out here, I didn't think anything like this would ever happen. Why did it have to be me?" Izuku's heart cracked open further, an agonizing ache blooming within. He could feel the echoes of unvoiced questions swirl in the air, the helpless turmoil of being young, lost, and invisible in a world that spun faster than they could grasp. "I'm sorry," he whispered, unable to say more, the tear-stained fear etched in her gaze resonating with the scars he still wore. "I'm so sorry." Izuku stepped forward, grounding the unraveling emotions of the moment. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amari," she managed, eyes wide, searching for safety in the ambiguity. "Okay, Amari. We're going to get you home." But you have to stay close to us, all right, he replied, his voice a firm compass amidst the storm swirling around them. Izuku nodded towards her as reassurance, feeling inadequate but refusing to abandon hope. You're brave, Amari. You can do this. We've got you. As they navigated back through the winding alleys, Izuku's mind raced with fragmented thoughts, memories of his own childhood and the nights spent lingering in shadows, abysmally aware yet eerily unseen, like smoke dissipating into the ether. He'd lived it, he'd survived it. The nostalgia hung heavy in the air, a bittersweet reminder of the dark corners where he had once been. Why were you out alone? He asked, his voice soft as they walked through streets devoid of light. I wanted to buy something for my mom, she said, voice trembling now, but something glimmered in her eyes. She's been sick a lot. I thought it'd cheer her up. Though the light dimmed, a flame ignited inside Izuku. Caring thoughts, sincere affection, blossomed amidst the pain of understanding. You're a good kid. She'll be proud of you, he responded, echoing distant memories of resilience and compassion he'd felt towards his own mother in countless battles fought. But his breath hitched when the weight of the truth struck, how many others had slipped through the cracks he had failed to protect. How many others were out there, lost in their own relentless nightmares. By the time they reached the main road, the sparse sounds of the city began to envelop them, a soothing cacophony of life thriving amidst adversity. It was a stark contrast to the darkness that had clung to them all evening. The shadows receded slightly from Izuku's heart as he felt the warmth of outdoor lights illuminate their path. As they rounded the final corner, Izuku spotted Amari's mother, frantically pacing near a van. The moment their gazes connected, the sorrow that thrummed through the air faded, replaced by a tentative hope, every bit as fragile as the child they had just rescued. Amari, her mother cried, launching forward and pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. The two kids were locked in a whirlwind of emotion that shattered the emptiness woven from uncertainty. Izuku's chest tightened at the sight of such grief morphing speedily into relief. Tears spilled down Amari's face, but now they cascaded alongside laughter of relief and forgiveness. I was so scared, she cried, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. I thought I lost you. I'm here. I'm right here, her mother said, cradling her head as if Amari was the most precious treasure in the universe, a heart raw with the tenderness of unfathomable love, the warmth of safety returning like the sun after a storm. Izuku found himself stepping back, observing the exchange from a distance, a witness to the raw emotions laid bare before him. The truth of the moment swirled inside him, tight and painful, he felt the tears pooling in his throat, thick with the weight of the experiences rippling within their fates. Aizawa stood beside him, sensing the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirling around Izuku like a cyclone. You did good today, Midoriya, he said quietly, almost imperceptibly. But all Izuku could feel was the tremor of inadequacy threatening to consume him. But what about all the others? He whispered, haunted by the faces that had flashed through his mind, the moments he hadn't been able to write. Sometimes all you can do is what's in front of you, Aizawa replied, voice heavy with understanding. You can't save everyone. But every time you try, you create ripples in the world, one act at a time. They stood there in silence, watching as the reunion unfolded before them, a small glimpse of normalcy amidst chaos. Hope, fragile as it was, flickered in the air. But it didn't heal the wounds carved deep within Izuku's heart, the longing and sadness that danced within him. Instead, it layered on the pain, the knowledge he couldn't escape, that the world hadn't changed enough, that he wasn't enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness enveloped them once more. Testimonies of ghosts hidden beneath layers of neglect whispered softly to him, echoing the burdens they carried, souls entwined in misery. Faces crossed his mind as memories, all of them painfully etched in his consciousness, reminders of the lost battles waged in forgotten corners, everywhere hope had yet to reach. And in that moment, Izuku started to tremble once more, not from fear, but with a bittersweet wave of realization. The struggle was far from over. The night stretched thin around them, its darkness yielding to the flickering light of reality. With every step they took back toward the station, each moment became a vivid tapestry woven from pain and triumph. But escape didn't mean liberation. The ache remained a constant companion, imprinted like a wound that never healed. Izuku learned the hard truth, that even as he fought for others to find safety, he often faltered in his own journey. He couldn't carve out a path for himself, for his heart remained tangled in fleeting shadows. Every scream of another soul lost continued to haunt him like a chorus of lingering ghosts, a reminder of those he could not save, whirling around him, whispering promises of hope amidst the choking darkness. So he would fight on, not because he could change everything, but because he had to, because there was life in that struggle, in the moments they fought through the shadows together, in the fight that still lay ahead. Each heartbeat reverberated echoes of stolen potential, and yet they emerged together, rallied around the light of a small but ever-burning flame, a promise to keep pushing forward, together, amidst the relentless fight against the night. In the end, that promise might ultimately bear the scars of grief, but it also cradled the delicate flicker of hope burning bright through the darkness, a star in the vast expanse of suffering that begged to be seen, felt, understood. And that made all the difference. Izuku didn't speak the whole walk back. Aizawa didn't either. Not because there was nothing to say, there was too much. The air around them buzzed with unspoken words, the weight of 100 conversations suspended in the silence. Each step felt heavier than the last, and with every passing moment, the dread of what had just happened coiled tighter in his gut. The weight of the old storefronts loomed over them, watching with memories of both an unforgiving past and a suffocating present, and the stink of too many stories, too many painful memories clung to the air like a thick smoke. So they walked. Through alleys shadowed with melancholy and under flickering neon signs that spoke of promises long broken. Past the man who had spat at them earlier, who now watched with something colder than hatred in his eyes. Fear. By the time they reached the apartment, Izuku's hands had stopped shaking. But the stillness in his eyes was worse. Aizawa unlocked the door with a practiced ease, letting it swing open into the quiet space that felt an eternity away from the chaos outside. He didn't expect Izuku to follow, not after moments of violence and revelation. But he did. Silent. Like a weapon being resheathed, returned to a holster with a conscious reverence tinged by the fear of what it could do. The moment the door clicked closed, Aizawa turned. Izuku didn't face him. Instead, he walked straight to the kitchen, turned on the tap, as if it had gotten there by accident. Warm water cascaded over his skin, but it was too hot. Early signs of burns crept into his skin, red and angry, but he didn't flinch. He could feel the stinging heat as it bit into him. "You were going to hit him again," Aizawa said at last. It wasn't an accusation. It was the truth laid bare, stark against the stark white of the kitchen. Izuku didn't respond. The water kept running, a thunderous silence filling the void between them, thrumming with everything left unsaid. "I wasn't going to stop you for defending yourself," Aizawa continued, keeping his voice low, calm. Still nothing. Izuku's body was a fortress. But he was already unconscious, Aizawa pressed. That made Izuku freeze. His jaw worked rhythmically. Once. Twice. Then he turned off the tap, water drizzling down into the sink, an unwanted stream of distraction slipping away. He dried his hands, but the lingering sense of unease still clung to him, a shadow shadowing his every step. And then he said, very softly, "I didn't know." The words didn't come out angry. They came out like confession, like the remnants of something buried trying to claw its way back to the surface, shackled by ignorance. "I didn't know he was down," Izuku attempted again, the confession crumbling in the confines of his chest. I wasn't there." Aizawa stepped forward. Carefully. "What do you mean?" "I was watching myself from the outside," Izuku murmured, eyes averted, unable to bear the weight of their connection at this moment. "Like, I was behind a wall. And I didn't even notice he stopped fighting. I just kept going." A long, aching silence enveloped them, heavy with the memories of every dark moment Izuku had ever endured. He looked up, finally. His eyes were glassy. Not with tears. With fear. Not of Aizawa. But of himself. "I don't know where the line is," Izuku whispered, voice cracking, the admission a raw wound freshly opened. "Not anymore. Aizawa didn't say you do. Didn't say you'll find it again. He just said softly, tell me what it felt like." Izuku exhaled slowly. It came out long and heavy, as if something rotten was leaving his lungs. The darkness that had filled him with confusion rushed back, memories clawing for freedom. It felt good, he admitted, the confession striking through him like a knife. It felt clear. Like something inside me finally stopped buzzing. Like everything hurt less when I was hurting someone worse. A pause hung between them, stretched thin and taut, aching. And then it felt nothing. Just empty. There was another beat, and then I saw your face. Aizawa stepped closer. Still didn't touch. Still didn't crowd. But this time, when Izuku felt Aizawa's presence, he didn't flinch. The warmth radiated toward him like a long-lost sun trying to melt the ice that locked them both in place. "You stopped," Aizawa said, the statement quiet but firm. "I didn't want to. But you did." Silence stretched. Then, very low, Izuku whispered, "What happens when I don't?" The question rung like a bell, each chime echoing with raw anxiety. Aizawa answered the only way he could. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." High above the apartment building, unseen against the smog-thick skyline, a figure sat crouched on the ledge of the fire escape 2 buildings over. His boots balanced perfectly on the rusted rail, a poised predator waiting for the right moment to strike, unseen but aware. Dabi watched the window across the street, the insatiable curiosity coursing through him like electricity. He'd been there since the alley. Since he witnessed the way the kid moved, fluidly, like he owned the shadows. Since he realized what the kid looked like when he thought no one was watching, the traces of turmoil and confusion battling behind his wide, green eyes. Dabi blew a slow breath through his nose, watching as memories echoed in the boy's movements, haunting fragments of past lives left unaddressed. "It's starting," he muttered, barely above a whisper. Then, he disappeared into the smoke, becoming one with the creeping night, having seen something extraordinary, a reflection of his own chaotic existence mirrored in a boy on the verge of becoming something no one could contain. The first time Izuku saw a picture of Stain, he didn't understand what the fear was about. It was just a man. A blade. A philosophy carved into flesh and bandages. At first, it had felt familiar, like something he couldn't quite grasp, something bubbling beneath the surface. But the second time he saw him, on a wall, half-torn by graffiti, the words, "Hero Killer," smudged into a grotesque crimson spray paint, he felt something twist in his spine like a half-remembered bruise. Aizawa had caught him staring. Didn't say anything. But Izuku remembered that look. Not fear. Not concern. Recognition. Recognition of a darkness that lurked not only in the world but inside people, a darkness that could breed chaos, turning heroes into symbols of everything wrong with society. It was past midnight when Izuku slipped out, the soft creak of the apartment behind him fading into the background of his mind, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. He landed on the rooftop across the street, barefoot, the cool night air brushing against his skin, his hoodie sleeves flapping in the breeze. He wasn't running. He was testing. The way you might test a scab, just to see if it still bleeds. He ran the rooftops like he used to, quietly. Low. Measured. The city opened beneath him, not like a wound, but like something that had always known his name. The rail yards blinked their red lights, a predator's eyes in the distance. The old bridges groaned in the wind, a voice lost amid the currents. Every alley whispered the same truth back to him, "We remember what you were." He stopped 5 blocks out, near a construction site long since abandoned. Broken scaffolding and unhung drywall surrounded him like an old war zone, rebar jutting from cracked concrete ribs, a landscape that mirrored his own internal chaos and anguish. Perfect. He dropped to the floor below, hard. Knees bent, breath steady, arms swinging loose at his sides like something hunting, something desperate. His emotions churned, the boiling pressure bubbling up in his chest as he pulled out the knife. Not just any knife. The knife. The one he hadn't used since before Aizawa, a relic of a past he thought he had buried, a reminder of the boy he'd chosen not to be. The one with the ridged handle and the words, "Know where to cut," scratched into the grip, a watchful guardian of a truth he could no longer run from. He turned it over in his hands. Then attacked the air. There was no grace to it. Not like the training videos. No DSPLN. Only desperation. A slash. A twist. A pivot that nearly threw him off balance but still landed with a brutal snap, a reflection of the turmoil inside him echoed in each movement. Over and over. Cut. Block. Elbow. Spin. He didn't think. Didn't want to think. He just moved until his lungs screamed, burning and aching. Until the silence filled with a sound he couldn't place, something between a snarl and a sob, the darkness clawing to be unleashed. "You're gonna throw your shoulder out, baby brother." Izuku whipped around, blade raised, stance tight, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. But it wasn't an enemy. It was a ghost. Perched on a stack of cement blocks like he belonged there. Blue-black coat open, collar turned high. Cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. Dabi. Again. Izuku didn't lower the blade. "Why are you here?" he asked, breath catching slightly in his throat, the encounter leaving him winded, emotions swirling into something dizzying. Dabi shrugged, flicking the ash off his cigarette as he surveyed Izuku with an insatiable curiosity. "Didn't realize the city was still breeding things like you." Izuku didn't move. "I'm not looking for a mentor," he snapped, feeling the need to assert himself, to prove that he still had control. "Good," Dabi replied, sliding down off the stack. "I'm not here to offer." They stood 10 feet apart. The wind howled between them, carrying the weight of unasked questions like a storm brewing at the edges of the sky. "Are you watching me?" Izuku demanded, the tension thickening between them, a taut line about to snap. "Maybe." "You think I'm dangerous," Izuku insisted, teeth clenched, determined to hold on to his ground. "I know you are." Izuku's eyes narrowed, disbelief bubbling up like adrenaline through his veins. "Then why haven't you told anyone?" Dabi smiled, a sharp, dangerous grin that felt unsettling. There was something sharp in it, an unspoken understanding laced with enthusiasm. "Because I don't want you stopped." Izuku didn't speak. Didn't blink. The knife lowered a little. Only a little. "I'm not like you." Dabi stepped closer. His boots scraped the cement, a sound inching forward, like a predator closing the distance. "No. But you could be." "I don't want to be." "I didn't either," Dabi said softly, the confession drifting around them like a specter, haunting the space between their shared truths. Then, without another word, he turned. Started walking. He paused just before disappearing down the side of the structure. Left a single line in his wake, "When you start bleeding for the right reasons, come find me." Izuku didn't follow. Didn't speak. He stood there in the empty construction site, knife loose in his fingers, chest rising and falling like something was still inside him, trying to fight its way out. He stayed until dawn broke through the darkness. The sky was pink by the time he made it back. That soft, painful kind of pink that made everything feel more vulnerable than it should, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting to collapse under the weight of inevitable loss. Izuku slipped through the apartment window like a shadow that wasn't supposed to return but knew it had to. He didn't make a sound. He never did. But Aizawa was already awake. And waiting. He sat in the same chair by the window he'd fallen asleep in so many nights now. Hoodie sleeves pushed up, scar on his cheek catching the early light like the remnants of a tough battle. He didn't say anything at first. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't ask where Izuku had been, even though he obviously wanted to. Just said, low and steady, "You left your knife in the sink." Izuku froze halfway across the room, feeling his heart stutter in his chest. His hands went still at his sides, uncurling as realization washed over him. "I washed it," Aizawa continued, a calming force amidst the waking shadows. "Because it was bloody." A beat passed. "Not fresh. Not from tonight." Silence hung in the air, thickening until it threatened to suffocate. Izuku swallowed hard, every nerve ending caught in a vice grip. He finally said, voice wavering, "It wasn't someone. It was me." Another beat. "I just needed to remember." Aizawa stood slowly. Crossed the space between them with cautious, calculated steps, doing his best to honor the distance that had stretched between them, almost to avoid startling the delicate boy standing beneath all that weight. "You needed to remember what?" he asked gently, his eyes penetrating as if searching for the very truth lurking within shadows of Izuku's heart. Izuku didn't look at him, guilt wrapping tightly around him like chains, a dark reminder of every moment he'd survived that, despite all odds, had left its scars. "Where I came from," he rasped, the admission tumbling from his lips like a stone slipping into a riverbed. "You haven't forgotten." "I try to," he whispered, the spirit of shame crawling over the surface of his skin, prickling with unwanted memories. "And then people like him show up and make me want to go back." A pause passed between them, thick with unspoken acknowledgement. "Who?" Izuku finally looked up. Eyes sharp. "Haunted. Dabi." That landed. Aizawa didn't step back, but his jaw set firmly, the night's weight pressing into him, reverberating between the two like the echoes of thunder beyond the horizon. "What did he say?" "Nothing I didn't already know," the words stumbled through Izuku's lips, a door festering open. "He said I wasn't better." "And what is it you think you know, Midoriya?" Aizawa forced the words out, the steel beneath them cracking like broken glass. "That I'm not better," Izuku asserted. "Than them." Aizawa's voice hit low and grave. "You are not your damage." Izuku flinched, a visceral reaction swelling inside him like a crack in glass. "Then why does it still control me?" he challenged, confusion laced within confusion. "Because you haven't forgiven yourself for surviving it," Aizawa insisted, the conviction driving home like the slams of a hammer against iron. The room went still again. Too still. Then Izuku's voice came, quieter than a whisper, as if sharing the deepest hurt. "I don't know if I want to." That stopped Aizawa cold. It struck him, simmering in recognition as disbelief and pain combined. He stared at the boy, his boy, even if neither of them had said it, and saw not malice, not villainy, but grief turned inward like a knife that never dulled, something blinding woven by fire. Izuku. The name sounded heavier than ever, as if the weight of the world rested unceremoniously on both of their shoulders. "You don't have to be fixed." "I don't think I can be," came Izuku's reply, his voice cracking under the strain of honesty. "I'm not asking you to be." A breath passed between them, weak and uncertain. "I'm asking you to stay." Izuku didn't answer. But he didn't run. They stood there until the light grew too loud, until morning poured in through the blinds like it had permission to reclaim the space so long shrouded in shadows. And then, finally, Izuku moved. He walked past Aizawa. Quietly. Not toward the door. To the couch. The blanket. The tea. The soft things. And for once, he didn't sit like he was waiting to be punished. He just sat. Like a boy. Tired. But still here. And for once, he didn't feel the need to hide himself behind a facade of bravado. He didn't lash out, didn't run, didn't feel like he had to prove something, anything, to anyone. Just a boy, tired but still here, fighting battles one day at a time, lingering at the brink of hope between what had been and what could still be. Aizawa watched him there, vulnerability engulfing the connection they shared, relief and pain intertwining like threads of a tapestry unfurling against the hallway of their hearts. The warmth solidified into a promise, an oath exchanged quietly between them, silent yet undeniable. In that moment, they were not just teacher and student or protector and protege, they were two souls navigating the dark, intertwined by struggle, yearning to heal, to find home in a world that threatened to swallow them whole. And that moment, fragile yet powerful, held the weight of 1,000 battles yet to come. Every fear, every doubt, every scrap of hope coursed through them, whispering the ancient truths embedded deep within their spirits, that no matter what tomorrow held, they would face it together. And that was enough. Chapter 4, Break the Boy, Build the Blade. The first clip showed up on a message board 3 days after the alley. It was grainy. Shot from a busted fire escape cam on the edge of a decommissioned district, one of those forgotten places where the power grid had gone half-blind, and the Commission's patrols had grown thin, allowing the area to fester in neglect like an untreated wound. The air crackled with tension, electric and raw, a restless energy like the hush before a storm that never quite unleashed its fury. The video lasted 22 seconds. Just 22 seconds of haunting footage that played on a loop, capturing a snapshot of violence and desperation. It showed a man, a hooded figure, grabbing a girl. In that fleeting moment, he was a blur, moving faster than the eye could track, like an animal cornered on the brink of survival. Heart-pounding panic thudded in the heart of the city that had become so deeply familiar yet painfully estranged to Izuku. And then, a hooded figure slammed the man into the wall. 1 hit. Then 2. Then 3. Not fatal. Not gentle, either. The girl ran, her small figure darting through the alley like a shadow fleeing the light of day. The blur didn't follow. The title of the post read, "Spine Isn't Dead." Below it, the comments began to pour in, buzzing like electrical currents, each tapping into something primal and forgotten deep within the realm of humanity, a collective yearning for safety, honesty, and recognition. Same hoodie. Same same brutal efficiency. Look at the elbow position, same strike pattern as the green ghost who disappeared 4 years ago. Spine's back. And he's not running anymore. The comments started within minutes. Some whispered disbelief, some marveled in awe, others in fear of what this might mean. "You sure that's him?" one comment questioned, laced with anxiety. "He's supposed to be gone. He didn't kill the guy." "That's new," another quipped, a thin veil of nervous laughter barely masking the anxiety blooming below. "Commission covered him up. Bet money. I heard he used to make them kill themselves if he left them alive. Apparently everyone can tell when you were attacked by Spine. No one wants to associate with a victim of Spine," a lurker chimed in, their username echoing past experiences they couldn't let go of, grief lingering just below the surface. "He's got Eraser's timing. You think they're working together?" The thread was scrubbed 6 hours later. But not before it had been reposted to 12 other boards. One of them. Private. Encrypted. Commission level clearance only. Midoriya Izuku. The voice came from a screen in a dark, heavily fortified office. It was low, a woman in authority somewhere amid the shadows, resonating uncertainty. "Possible," another voice replied. Flat. Analytical. "But we buried that file." Officially, he was deregistered. Quirkless. Vanished before the League ever made a move. Well. He's back. A long, oppressive pause settled thickly in the air, almost suffocating. "Get the file. All versions. Physical and digital." "Ma'am, he's, now." Izuku didn't know he was trending. He didn't use the internet. Didn't check the news. Didn't even carry a real phone. Just a cracked burner with no SIM and a list of 4 numbers, 3 belonging to family and friends who never called and 1 belonging to a contact labeled only, Zawa. He sat on the fire escape 3 floors above Aizawa's apartment, his hoodie pulled tightly around him, headphones resting around his neck even though the music had long ceased to play. All he could hear was white noise, the static of city life blended with his wild heartbeat, an anxious rhythm drumming in his ears. His breath clouded faintly in the air, dissipating almost as quickly as it formed, 2 spirals of mist touched momentarily by the cold. He wasn't cold. Maybe it was the sweatshirt fabric, or perhaps he had simply grown numb to everything except anticipation, waiting for a storm that he could feel brewing just beneath the surface. Below him, the apartment windows glowed with kitchen light, warm and inviting, flickering like the last echoes of hope in a world that felt like it had forgotten his name. He could hear Aizawa moving, slow, methodical, a comforting rhythm that punctuated the isolation of his thoughts. The sound of a mug meeting ceramic, cabinet doors creaking open and shut, a chair scraping against wood, home noises that filled the emptiness that lingered in his chest, echoing memories of routine they had woven together over the years. Izuku stayed outside, clinging to the fragile distance between his turbulent emotions and the solace inside. Because the moment he walked back through that door would mean he couldn't run anymore. Would mean confronting everything he had suppressed since that night, the violence, the shame, the relentless fear clawing at him from the dark corners of his mind. He'd fought twice since the alley. Each conflict felt like a small testament to an unyielding survival instinct. Once in a stairwell, where a man with a quirk that created barbed wire from his palms had tried to mug a college kid for his shoes. The flash of desperation and fear had ignited something in Izuku, each decision culminating into an overwhelming urge to protect that kid. And once in a parking garage, where a woman with a minor strength enhancement had lifted a teenager by their purple hair and laughed, the sound chilling in its cruelty. He swiftly dispatched them both, leaving them breathing but no longer capable of remembering all the details of the altercation. Mere shadows of an encounter fading into their minds as they dropped, stunned and dizzy, a fleeting moment of terror before the reality of their actions crashed back in like inevitable waves. Izuku leaned forward at the edge of the fire escape, the metal rail cool against the back of his hand as he peered down at the street below. It felt like a comfort zone he knew intimately, a battlefield entwined with his memories, tethering him to the fight against a growing darkness that threatened to engulf him whole. "I don't want to break them," Izuku had said once during training, his voice uncharacteristically steady, underlining the churning emotions that surged and crashed inside him. They had been standing in an abandoned gym that Aizawa had repurposed for quiet training sessions, the kind with no cameras, no records, only impact and breath shared between them. "I just don't know how to stop," Izuku had confessed, his voice cracking with the weight of it all, the rawness breaking through every barrier he had meticulously built around himself. One of Aizawa's students, Hitoshi, he thinks, was his opponent that day. Tall, calm, with eyes like flint, ever expedient. He smiled like he wasn't nervous, like the weight of the moment didn't crush against them. The air hummed with tension, layered over expectations like a thick blanket. "Go easy on me, ghost boy," he said, rolling his neck, the teasing light trying to break through the tension, but Izuku didn't smile back. He never did. They started slow. Faint movements. Footwork. Space measuring, everything carefully calculated. Izuku didn't use his voice. He didn't hum. He didn't activate anything, keeping his emotions restrained like a tight coil prepared to snap at any moment, trying to maintain equilibrium in the eye of an encircling storm. But the moment Hitoshi reached for a feint, something cracked inside Izuku, a whisper of an urge coursing through him like an electric current igniting every cell in his being. He moved. Fast. Faster than he meant to. Faster than he was taught. Hitoshi blocked. Once. Twice. Then his shoulder hit the mat with a sickening thud that stilled the world around them. Izuku froze, his breath catching in his throat, the sound of flesh meeting the ground echoing like the toll of a bell. Wide-eyed. Terrified. Not of Hitoshi. Not for himself. But of the power spiraling out of control. He staggered back, overwhelmed by the swell of adrenaline that surged through him like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out everything else as the world dimmed, the vibrancy of life fading to a distant hum. What had he just done? Aizawa was already there. Calm. Steady. Checking Hitoshi's impact, ensuring he was alright as Aizawa's fingers grazed over the collarbone, assessing the damage with the practiced eye of a warrior who had seen too much. Not broken, he said plainly, shifting to face Izuku before the weight of shame drowned him further. Bruised. Hitoshi winced, a flicker of pain crossing his features. Badly. Izuku pulled away, fear clawing at him, panic edging in. He left the gym that night, not to punish himself, just to escape, to retreat from the sharp sting of confusion and guilt that suffocated him, not returning for 4 long days. The burner phone buzzed once, heavy in his pocket, startling him from the haze of his thoughts. He was crouched on a ledge 4 stories up, watching a pharmacy across the street where a man with a history of selling expired meds had a predilection for exploiting the vulnerable. He hadn't moved yet, just waited. The buzz made his ribs snap tight, nerves igniting beneath the surface like wildfire. No one texted him. Not even Aizawa. Not even Hitoshi. He pulled the phone from his pocket, feeling the thrill of unease surge within him. The screen flickered once, a moment of breathless anticipation. Then lit with a message. Unknown number, nice moves. Love the new aim. You've grown up. Meet me soon. The city's getting loud. Drop of blood Blackheart no name. No location. No response field. Izuku stared at it until the screen faded black again, cold fingers tracing over the surface. He told Aizawa nothing. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even when Aizawa handed him a folded newspaper, a clipped article tucked inside, and said, "This came from a commissioner's desk. They're asking questions." The headline was crystal clear. Clinical. Unidentified vigilante foils assault in East Muzutafu's similar profile to the 3-year-old case involving Spine, presumed dead. Underneath that, in red pen, Aizawa's pen, were 2 words circled. Pattern forming. Aizawa didn't speak it out loud. But Izuku heard it anyway. They're watching you. That night, he didn't sleep on the couch. He didn't sleep at all. He left just after midnight, with no sound, no shoes, only shadows. He moved through alleys, along train tracks, over chain-link fences, and rooftops that felt familiar against his palms. Not out of necessity. Out of instinct. His body remembered what it was like to disappear, like every nerve was screaming for freedom. His mind never forgot what it cost to come back. He circled the city 3 times. Didn't patrol. Didn't engage. Just moved. When he got back just before sunrise, there was something folded in his coat pocket. He hadn't put it there. He was sure he hadn't. A scrap of dark paper, smooth, high quality. Folded once. Inside was a hand-drawn symbol. A blade. Curved. Dipped in ink that looked too red to be anything, and beneath it, "You're not the only ghost who came back." He didn't follow the trail immediately. He didn't sleep on it. He couldn't. In Aizawa's apartment, the lights were off. The hallway quiet. The chair by the window was empty. The door to Aizawa's room. Open. Izuku paused briefly, a flood of emotions washing over him. Then knocked. His heart pounded against his ribs louder than he thought possible. Aizawa's voice came from within. Low. Steady. Come in. He entered the room, soft light painting the walls a warm yellow. Aizawa sat at the edge of his bed, blanket folded around his lap, eyes shadowed by the low light of the desk lamp. He looked tired. He looked like he'd been waiting. "Where did you go?" Aizawa finally asked. Izuku didn't lie. "Nowhere." "That's worse," Aizawa said quietly, the weight of his disappointment seeping into the air around them. They're watching you, aren't they? Izuku didn't respond. A heavy silence enveloped the space between them, lingering like smoke. What could he even say? Izuku could feel the weight of Aizawa's gaze, an unwavering reminder of their unspoken connection, the memories stitched together over time. You didn't have to vanish like that, Aizawa pressed, his voice softer now, laden with concern. Izuku kept his eyes locked on the floor, unwilling to meet Aizawa's gaze. The anxiety fluttered in his chest, navigating through a blur of emotions that felt like an avalanche crashing down on him. I had to get away, he finally murmured, the admission barely escaping his lips. From what? For what I am, he whispered, or what I might become. Aizawa's silence was potent as he watched Izuku wrestle with himself, the boy flashing too much vulnerability for his comfort, heartache echoing in the air between them. He stepped closer, reaching out. Show me your list. Izuku hesitated, then nodded, heart pounding as he swiped his finger across the phone screen, revealing a document that laid bare everything he carried within him, papers and ideals, darkness and scrawlings across the screen that had become both a lifeline and a shackle. Aizawa read through it, brows furrowing deeper with every line. Long pauses hung as he processed the depths of Izuku's turmoil, heartbreak sinking in with every note, every list of potential energies that twisted through his soul. What are you afraid of? Aizawa's voice was NTMT, like a lifeline thrown out to a stranger grappling against the tides. The darkness, Izuku replied, his voice raw and trembling. That it will consume everything I am. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications and swirling emotions. You're not just your power, Midoriya. Aizawa said carefully, conviction quiet beneath every word. You can choose to fight it. You are not your past. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. But from somewhere deep inside, a whisper of strength took hold. I don't know if I can. Aizawa stepped even closer now, settling onto the edge of the bed. You can. But I need to understand. Izuku's heart raged against his chest, every pulse echoing like a war drum. He needed to voice the truths that tormented him, the shadows whispering doubts and fears, but fear of words held him captive. Every time I fight, he began, slowly, every single time, it feels like I'm slipping away. Like I'm losing the last of myself. Aizawa nodded, absorbing the weight of Izuku's confession. You didn't lose yourself when you intervened last night. The ache inside Izuku flared anew. I didn't want to hurt him. Aizawa paused before continuing. But you did. I don't know how to stop it. I thought I was helping. But I don't know where the line is anymore. Aizawa hesitated, weighing his words carefully in the deepening silence. You need to keep searching. You need to hold on to what you believe in. Izuku's eyes shimmered, the weariness now intertwined with a blaze of fury. What if I can't find it? Then we'll find it together, Aizawa promised, voice steadying like a beacon in the storm, his presence signaling an unbreakable bond. But Izuku felt the gravity of his words pressing heavy against his soul. Together, he echoed softly, the sound barely breaking the silence. In that moment, something shifted, like a door creaking open, like dawn breaking after a long, oppressive night. If I find it, Izuku murmured, will it stop me from becoming what I fear I already am? Aizawa's eyes lingered on him, penetrating and unyielding, weighing every word like precious cargo. Tell me what you want to be. That struck a chord deep in Izuku's chest. Wasn't that the question he had feared facing, the one that lingered like a ghost? I want, he began, words tumbling out with urgency. I want to be, but before he could finish, Aizawa's phone vibrated violently on the table, the sound pulling them back to the reality of the world outside their little bubble, the chaos that had swirled around them only hours before. In that moment, Izuku clenched his fists. Answer it, he urged urgently. But Aizawa shook his head, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. Not yet. Izuku exhaled, his heart caught somewhere between anticipation and dread. But Aizawa turned back to him, the weight of determination and shared vulnerability swirling between them. But it can wait. We need to fight this together, like we've always done. He stepped forward. Reached into his coat. Held out the folded symbol, the ink seeming dark against the pale light of dawn. Aizawa took it. Opened it. Read it once. Didn't blink. Just said, "That's Stain's mark." Izuku exhaled slowly, the admission hanging between them like an unanswered question. "I thought he was dead." "He isn't," Aizawa said firmly. "Just buried." A long pause loomed between them like a chasm torn through time. "You're digging him up." "I didn't ask to." "You didn't have to." Izuku could feel the gravity of their conversation coiling heavier around him, but he remained silent. The anxiety fluttered in his chest, navigating through memories of blades that glinted in the dark, the haunting echo of decisions that had been made long before he ever thought to fight back. It felt like revenge. It felt like guilt. It felt like the shame he still wore like armor, breathing and reflecting the agony of their choices. Dabi watched the kid move, but he didn't follow him, not exactly. Not like before. He just appeared where the wind was going. Ahead of him. Around him. Where the streets sloped into silence and the sky forgot how to glow. Izuku walked like someone being hunted by ghosts he built himself. Good posture. Light steps. But too alert, like every nerve in his body was wired to respond to danger. He kept brushing the inside of his coat every few minutes, like the folded message might bite him through the fabric, a constant reminder of where he had been, where he had come from, and how easily it could all slip away again if he wasn't careful. Good, Dabi thought. Means it worked. He didn't reach out that night. Didn't drop another note. Didn't say his name. He just watched. Because the real message hadn't been the symbol. It was the way it got there. A blind spot. A gap in vigilance. A breach. Dabi needed him to understand, if I wanted to hurt you, you'd be dead. Instead, I'm leaving you hints. Because someone else is coming. And they won't play soft. Back at the apartment, Aizawa stood at the sink with the envelope in both hands. It had been slid through the door sometime between 2:40 and 3 a.m. He hadn't heard it. No footsteps. No knock. Just paper where air had been. He didn't open it immediately. The weight alone was enough to tell him what it was. Heavy. Official stock. Stamped with the seal of a division that shouldn't exist anymore. Commission, internal only subject, Midoriya. He opened it with a knife, heart in his throat. Inside, a printed registry entry, years old, marked voided, a withdrawal request, signed by someone he'd never met, a second page, redacted, classified, and at the bottom, in a font smaller than necessary, do not contact family. Subject is not considered missing. He stood still for a long time after reading it. Then he sat down and picked up his phone. Mike answered on the first ring. Yeah. They're watching him again. A pause. Static. You sure? They left the file. Show Yuta, they know he's alive. Izuku didn't ask why the kettle didn't whistle that morning. Didn't question why Aizawa's face was harder than usual, strained by the weight of his own worries, the oppressive air thick with unsaid words. He just sat on the couch and watched the steam from his mug rise and vanish like breath in cold air. Neither of them said it. But something had shifted. Something heavy. Later, when Izuku checked his burner again, there was one more message. No words. Just a photograph. A blurry image. Of him, in the alley with the girl. Taken from above. From the rooftops. With a timestamp. A full minute before Aizawa arrived. The phone shouldn't have had reception. It didn't have a SIM. No data plan. No open connection. And yet, the screen lit up with an incoming call at exactly 2:36 a.m. No caller ID. Izuku stared at it for 4 full seconds before answering. He didn't say hello. Didn't say anything. He just waited. The voice on the other end was dry, its sound rasping like parchment left too close to heat. But the cadence was clear. Controlled. Midoriya Izuku. Spine. Ghost. Blade. Silence stung the air, pressing heavily against his chest. You've been wearing too many names. The voice continued, each word laden with authority. It's time to choose one. Izuku's heart didn't race. His fingers didn't shake. But something in his stomach folded in on itself, twisting with dread and recognition. Stain, he said. Not a question. A breath lingered on the other end. A slight pause. Then, you survived the erasure. That makes you a mistake in their system. You can either run from it, or use it. Choose. He felt the weight of expectation settle on him, pressing harder than ever. The call ended. Just like that. No goodbye. No number saved. The phone went dead immediately after. The screen went black and never lit again. When he pulled the battery out, he found a note beneath it. On the back of the casing. Scratched in with something sharp. You are not your silence. He didn't sleep that night. Didn't sit. Didn't speak. He went to the rooftop and stared at the city like it owed him answers. The wind didn't answer. But someone else did. It wasn't Aizawa. It was a man in a long coat. Hat low. Face hidden. Just a shape in the distance, standing beside the edge of a building across the way. Watching. Only for a moment. Then gone. Like smoke. Aizawa knew. He knew something had changed. He could see it in Izuku's eyes. Not darker. Not colder. Not broken. Just, decided. Like something inside him had chosen to stop waiting for permission. Like the edge of the blade had stopped being metaphor. The next morning, in Aizawa's mailbox, was a sealed envelope. No return address. Inside, a photo of young Izuku, age 10, smiling. A child's UA tour pass, with a bent corner. And a small slip of paper. On it, handwritten, "Don't let the blade forget it was once a boy." Aizawa sat with the photo for a long time. He didn't cry. He just traced the corner of the pass with his thumb, nostalgia mixing with grief. That little boy had a spark, a light that had been buried so deep beneath layers of pain and loss. Then he stood. And pulled the first training file marked Vigilante Class Candidate from the drawer beneath his bed. In that moment, Izuku found himself teetering on the edge of something monumental. It felt like the moments before a storm, the air alive with electric energy, charged with what was yet to come. Yet beneath the layers of uncertainty lay a flicker of resolve. He was not simply a ghost or a blade, he was a boy who had withstood the tumult. And once this thought settled, he felt the corners of his heart begin to unfurl, to breathe, at long last. Together, he and Aizawa would face whatever loomed on the horizon. They would become a shield against the darkness that sought to claim them both, shattering the chains of a past that clung too closely. And as the dawn broke anew, painting everything in hues of gold, they would rise up, not as remnants of their sorrow, but as warriors ready to carve their own paths, together. With hearts intertwined, they would brandish the echoes of the past as weapons not of despair, but of hope, a fragile, perfect promise forged. Chapter 5, Teeth in the dark. They say Stain disappeared. That he bled out somewhere between the prison walls and the firebombed tunnels of Hosu, lost to forgotten echoes of pain and chaos. But, disappear was a word for cowards, for the ones who turned their backs on the storm rather than weather through it. Stain didn't disappear. He waited. He understood that time wasn't something you ran from. It was a tool that could be sharpened to a deadly edge, a weapon to wield. In the fractured remnants of his city, where sirens sang lullabies of despair, and shadows breathed life into treachery, Stain dug deep into the fissures of time, a patient predator in a world that had almost forgotten his name. On that fateful day, Stain saw the clip while sifting through the undercurrents of the digital mire. He wasn't interested in mainstream news, where glittering falsehoods outshone the gritty truth. Instead, he immersed himself in the scattered whispers of the forgotten, the threads, the boards, the hidden realms where rebels and monsters coalesced into narratives of both horror and hope. And there he was. The boy. Clad in a green hoodie, standing resolute. The camera caught him mid-stride, left foot forward, spine aligned like a killer. His eyes held a dread calmness that belied his youth, a deceptive chill that sent ripples through the air thick with unwritten potential. Spine. The name ignited a surge of nausea within Stain. Not because it was wrong, indeed, it was deep-seated truth born from a twisted origin, but because it was earned by someone else. Someone who shouldn't still exist. He replayed the clip 23 times, each viewing etching more intricacies into his mind. It wasn't the violence that drew him back, he had seen plenty of that and had danced dangerously close to its allure. It was the restraint, the subtle hesitation. Stain recognized that pause, the gap between the last strike and the boy's retreat. That moment was critical. It meant the boy hadn't committed yet. Not to the violence. Not to the ideology. Not to himself. That meant Stain had time. Not much. But enough. That same night, the weight of circumstance seeped into the corners of his existence. He began to follow him, not like a hawk trailing its prey, but as a guardian ghost of a distant past. He kept his distance, stealthy in shadows, close enough to study the subtleties of the boy's movements, the way silence lingered around him like a steadfast ally, how he carried it in his pockets like the last remnants of an old world. He observed the way the boy refused to take credit for his actions, no signature left behind, no symbols marking his presence, no call signs to elevate his name. It was purely action, a blade hurled into the dark without a thought of its potential return. Stain slinked through alleys pungent with acrid smoke, remnants of the war that had decimated hopes but hadn't entirely extinguished the flames of rebellion. He made his nights in rusted train yards, forgotten police vans, and amidst the twisted remnants of a society that had once promised safety. He listened. He watched. He remembered. And piece by piece, his observations unveiled something dangerous within the boy. Stain realized that the boy wasn't becoming him. He was becoming better. And that terrified him. Better meant stronger. Stronger meant unpredictable. And unpredictable was how systems fell, how they crumbled beneath the weight of their lies to expose the rot beneath. Even the ones he believed deserved to fall. In his quest for understanding, Stain stumbled upon an old photograph once, half hidden and crumpled against the peeling paint of a light post in sector. The image stirred something deep inside him, a green hoodie, 10 sizes too big, the faint outline of a boy's smile untouched by sorrow, eyes wide with the innocence of youth. There he stood, a flicker of what could have been. After a moment, Stain folded the photograph carefully and slipped it into the lining of his coat. Not as a keepsake, but a reminder. A reminder of that fleeting innocence, long lost but desperately needed. Stain watched as the boy approached, every nerve in his body primed for a confrontation, yet Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't move. He didn't speak. There was a haunting stillness radiating from him, and the weight of expectation lay thick between them, as if the very air was aware of the predator looming just out of sight. Stain broke the silence first, his voice a low growl reminiscent of dark corners and lost shadows. "You're not ready." Izuku didn't answer, allowing the words to settle like dust in the air. "You think restraint makes you moral," he pressed, but still met with silence. "You think kindness makes you human." Finally, just a blink. Perhaps even a ghost of a regret. "You're wrong," Stain said, a grim semblance of appreciation clawing its way into his tone. "But I admire the lie." "You don't scare me," Izuku says. "I should," Stain replies. "No," he whispers. I scare me. Izuku turned slowly, a calculated movement infused with a strange kind of gravity. The only difference between us, he spoke, his voice quiet but resonant, is that I remember who I was before the world bled it out of me. Stain studied him, a cold smile cracking across his lips, not with joy, but with a reminiscent ache. Good, he whispered, the words heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. Now try to hold on to it. Over the course of a week leading to their next potential meeting, Izuku's life began to unravel in seemingly small ways, yet those changes were monumental. Signs began to surface, subtle yet unmistakable in their implications. He saw a symbol scratched into the side of a railing, a silent promise inked into the concrete reality. There was a blade drawn on the back of a wanted poster, a warning left in the margins of a story that was still being written. A precise cut in the chain-link fence that only someone with an extraordinary aim could have managed, a mark of intent. Stain adapted his methods, not stalking but marking. Each mark whispered the same message, the kind that clawed at the edges of destiny, I'm still watching. In the days that followed, Aizawa could feel something churn within Izuku, a restlessness that brewed beneath the surface like a storm on the horizon. When Aizawa asked what was wrong, the sharpness in his friend's eyes told him more than words ever could. Izuku didn't lie. He couldn't. There was a stifled truth lingering in the air, unmistakable and heavy. Aizawa recalled how Izuku fought with an anxious intensity, eyes often darting, sensing danger that resonated beneath the mundane. He watched him sleep, always facing the door, as if guarding against specters that haunted the dark. In silence, Aizawa made decisions that would echo through their lives. They didn't speak of fears or concerns aloud, there were emotions too raw to voice, but Aizawa changed the locks that night, fortified the fortress they surrounded themselves with. Mike, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, installed a new rooftop alarm, setting it to screech a warning at any perceived threat looming against their lives. And Izuku, amidst this growing storm, found solace in the old rhythms of life. He started humming again, not to weaponize the melodies, but to comfort himself, to remind himself of the humanity that flowed beneath the layers of chaos. And Stain watched it all unfold from the shadows, a phantom tethered to the secrets of the city. For the first time in years, he felt something strange stir within him. It was neither pride nor hunger, nor the obsession he had lived with for so long. It was something softer, more poignant. Grief. Because the boy was no longer becoming a killer in the dark but was blossoming into a cause, each day layering more conviction into his purpose. And causes, as he well knew, were harder to stop than men. Causes had lives of their own, pulsing with relentless energy that could ignite the heart of a city or undo the shackles of oppressive regimes. As Stain drifted like smoke through the charred remnants of his world, he couldn't shake the growing realization that Izuku was perilously close to breaking through to something greater than both of them. He was approaching the precipice of a revolution, a catalyst poised to challenge not just the monsters of their world, but the very darkness that threatened to engulf them all. In this intricate dance of shadows and light, doubt began to gnaw at Stain's resolve, for he felt the shifting tides of destiny. A weight settled upon him, heavier than the sins of his past, a reckoning was coming, and he would be forced to confront not only the world he had coexisted with but the very foundation of his own existence. What emerged from that reckoning remained uncertain, but one truth was undeniable: the only way forward was through the acceptance of their intertwined fates, a path that would lead them through the flames of transformation, challenging every ideology and forging new alliances in a battle greater than they could ever imagine. As Stain continued to watch, cloaked in the shadows of the night, his fingers grazed against the old photograph resting against his chest, a symbol of resilience. He had not yet understood the full scale of what Izuku could become, nor the way it would ripple through their fates. The boy's journey had just begun, and with each passing moment, the threshold drew ever closer, the line between predator and prey blurring in a world defined by vengeance and redemption. This was the beginning of a tale that would echo through the annals of time, an exploration into the depths of morality, defiance, and the complex sketches of humanity captured amidst the chaos, igniting worlds yet to be born. Would they emerge as harbingers of hope or mourn the ghosts of their choices? Only time would tell. And in the layers of night, the narrative continued to unfold, rich with possibilities and stark truths waiting to surface. The game was in motion, and the end was merely another beginning. Each choice they made would replace the narrative they lived, painting their futures with consequence, a mosaic of pain and purpose in an unforgiving world. The battle between light and darkness had begun, and both would fight to reshape the destinies that lay ahead. And as Stain lingered at the edge of this vast expanse of potential, he realized that he was no longer the hunter, nor simply the prey. He was a witness, a once battered specter fueled by a flicker of hope, perhaps even envy, to see if the spark ignited within the boy could illuminate their world in ways he had long thought impossible. Would Stain's waiting pay off, or would it become yet another echo lost to time? Only the unfolding of the story would tell. And so he settled deeper into the shadows, preparing himself for the storm that was brewing on the horizon, for as far away as it seemed, the dawn was in sight, relentless and insistent, and it would come with the ferocity of all restrained might unleashed. Chapter 6, Soft Things Die in the Light. It wasn't supposed to be a rescue. Aizawa had drilled this into Izuku from the very beginning. Just a pass-through. A presence. That was all they were meant to be this evening, two dark silhouettes slipping between the cracks of the city, unnoticed and unbothered, like shadows in a world hardly aware of their existence. Sometimes, Aizawa had insisted, merely being seen was enough to stop the worst from happening. That was what Aizawa said. What he believed. But to Izuku Midoriya, the insistent whisper of those words felt like a cruel joke. He had already lived the truth too many times over to accept the comfort it offered. Being seen isn't enough. Being seen never stopped anything. It didn't prevent the teacher who looked the other way when he was shoved into lockers or ridiculed for being different. It hadn't stopped the neighbor who never once asked him why he limped or looked uncomfortable under the mistreatment of his peers. And most heartbreakingly, it hadn't stopped the system that had carelessly filed him under quirkless, never bothering to check again. The world around him had shifted, river-like, carrying him along without so much as a glance back to see how it treated those who fell beneath its current. The warehouse on 7th Street smelled like mildew and battery acid, an intoxicating mix that turned Izuku's stomach. It felt heavy in the air, clinging to his skin like a second layer. The derelict structure loomed ahead of them, venerable in its decrepitude, a rotting beast with shadows lurking within its belly. Izuku could feel that darkness, the edges of it brushing against him like fingers probing for weakness. Aizawa, as ever, resumed his familiar stance, scarf draped loosely around his shoulders. The way it hung, it was a telltale sign that he was not actively fighting. His eyes were alert, scanning every shadow that moved, measuring exits like a chess player calculating his next move. Izuku stayed close behind him, maintaining a careful one-pace distance. Not because he was hiding, no, he would never hide again, but because people like him didn't get to walk in first. Those who had become the outsiders had no privilege nor precedence. He didn't speak. Izuku had learned long ago that questions had a way of drawing unwanted attention, a way of trapping you in a web of expectations and unwanted realities. Instead, he listened. He listened to the cold snap that hung in the air, an ominous reminder that danger had a tangible quality. He concentrated on the shuffle of bare feet behind the metal walls, a quickened pace, a desperate sound. And there, beneath it all, was the faintest echo of crying, soft, rhythmic, stifled, a cry choked off before it could be called a scream. Inside, they found 3 boys. All younger than Izuku. None older than 12. The boys huddled behind crates, small hands bound by thick collars that gleamed menacingly in the dim light. Icy fear gripped Izuku as he caught sight of them. A visceral rage ignited in his chest at their treatment, simmering just below the surface, ready to boil over. The moment the first boy glimpsed Aizawa, he flinched. The response was instinctual, rooted deep in fears that had yet to be forgotten. Yet the second boy, upon seeing Izuku, didn't flinch. Instead, he froze in place, his wide-eyed gaze boring into Izuku as if trying to decipher something unspoken, a riddle locked away behind closed doors. "Spine," the boy whispered, just audible enough to reach him through the thick shroud of fear. Izuku blinked, a fresh wave of confusion washing over him. He hadn't used that name in months. He hadn't told anyone. But the boy spoke it like a prayer, like a ghost story he hoped was real. For a moment, the weight of the world hung heavy between them, an exchange of identities, a link forged in pain and recognition. Izuku didn't correct him. Instead, he knelt down, unzipping his coat and offering it to the boy like an olive branch, the warmth of it, the fabric against the biting cold, a simple gesture that could cut through the horror of their reality. With gentle hands, he helped the child stand, wrapping the coat around frail shoulders that shook and trembled as if they had never known safety. "You don't have to be scared anymore," Izuku offered softly. He didn't believe it, not really. Fear was a lifelong companion that rarely released its grip on those who had felt abandonment in extreme form. But the boy did seem to believe it, staring up at Izuku with shining eyes full of hope and gratitude. That, in itself, was enough, a flicker of light in their darkest hour. The traffickers they encountered didn't go quietly. It was chaotic, the rattle of metal, muffled curses, and the dull thud of bodies connecting. One of them turned and bolted at the first sight of Aizawa's fierce determination. In a second, Aizawa was on him, grappling him to the ground with the speed of a predator. The others, however, stayed to fight, and Izuku felt all the muscles of his body tense, an electric current of rage running through him. He took 2 steps forward, then stopped, breath caught in his throat. He wanted to hit them. Wanted to break them in ways they would remember with every sunrise. They deserved that kind of retribution. Yet he didn't move, something stopped him, something deeper than mere hesitation. Aizawa's eyes watched from the distance, heavy with expectation but unmarred by judgment. He knew that Izuku was capable of unthinking destruction, yet the eyes of the boys also bore witness, gauging his every choice. The part of him that hummed with excitement at the thought of violence remained dormant, buried beneath months of conscious effort to ignore it. He didn't want to remember how satisfying it felt, to watch fear etch across faces that held malice, to unleash the violence that had raged within him for so long. When it was over, silence enveloped the warehouse like a thick blanket. There were small scattered sounds, the soft whimpers of the boys who had watched, the gentle scuff of Aizawa's boots as he made sure all threats were neutralized, and the echo of Izuku's quickened heartbeat in his ears. Outside, sirens could be heard faintly in the distance, but the police would not arrive for another 10 minutes, they had planned it this way, a calculated delay. The commission wanted plausible deniability, and Izuku had grown all too comfortable in this dance of shadows. But in that silence, something shifted. The small boy who had whispered Izuku's name looked up at him, eyes filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Your spine," he murmured again, solemn and reverent. Those words struck a chord deep within Izuku, reverberating like a bell that rang in the caverns of his soul. The identity he had cultivated in the shadows, the name he hadn't uttered in fear of what it might summon, here, in this moment, it meant something. He'd become a symbol, perhaps more than a person, and that realization weighed heavily on his shoulders. But Izuku made no reply. He simply knelt down once more, feeling the rough edges of the boy's collar, and affirmed their connection silently. The train ride back felt interminable. It was a mechanism of gears and RBB wheels against metal tracks, an invasive entity that should have propelled them forward but instead ground against the grain of his mind. Izuku sat quietly in the corner, his gaze trained firmly on his hands. There was a bruise blooming across his knuckles, dark and angry, an uninvited souvenir from the struggle, but he didn't know when it had happened. The memory of the fight felt faded, blurred, like a dream receding into the past upon waking. He couldn't remember hitting anyone. Aizawa's voice, low and quiet, pulled him from his thoughts. "You hesitated." Izuku nodded, unable to offer more in that moment. "Good," Aizawa replied quietly, his gaze still directed out the window, an expression of contemplation froze on his face. "You didn't have to." Izuku turned to study him, surprise blooming in his chest. Aizawa's tone didn't carry disappointment. There was an unspoken understanding that hovered in the air. Izuku stuttered, grappling for words. He wanted to explain, to justify, to make Aizawa see just how hard he was trying. I'm not proud of what they did to you, Aizawa continued, his voice steady. A shift in the air, an unyielding conviction. But I'm not ashamed of what you've become. In that moment, something untangled inside Izuku. A flicker of recognition crossed his mind. Aizawa saw him, truly saw him, not as spine, not as a combatant against the evils of the world, but as a person. When they returned to the apartment, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Hisashi was waiting, his demeanor calm but his eyes sharp as they flickered over the two of them, assessing and analyzing. The way his gaze traveled over Izuku's bruises. He didn't lecture. Instead, he opened the fridge, pulled out a bag of ice, wrapped it carefully in a towel, and approached Izuku. He handed it over, an offering veiled in tenderness. Here, he said, as a parent would hand a child a cherished toy. This belongs in your hands. Let it cool you down, such a small act, but one that brought an immense amount of comfort. Izuku, feeling the slight chill against his skin, didn't cry. Yet something within him settled, if only for a fleeting moment. As he accepted the attention, it felt as though layers of ice were being peeled back, revealing the warmth of human contact underneath. That night, sleep eluded him, a fragile dance of shadows on the wall shifting like memories. Darkness wrapped around him, thick and oppressive, only comforted by the faint light that struggled to leak through the edges of his eyelids. In his dreams, he saw something brilliant. It was light. Not warmth. Not sunrise. But the other kind, hard, blinding, a ferocious burn that singed away softness. The kind that made scars shine, leaving behind traces of battles fought and losses endured. When he woke, he found himself arched, breath caught tight between his teeth, gasping for a reality that felt tethered to torment. In the hallway, Aizawa was sitting against the wall, a silent sentinel, shoulders slumped and head tilted, casually watching the passage of time. He didn't look in, didn't ask questions, just stayed there, an anchor to reality when everything around Izuku felt adrift. Another moment drawn, another connection formed. The next day brought with it the weight of the world, yet they still didn't speak about the warehouse. An unspoken agreement, a pact made without words, the memory permeated the air, lingering like something unfinished. Yet as Izuku reached for his coat, as his fingertips brushed against the fabric, he felt something crumpled in the pocket. He withdrew it, opening the folded slip of paper. Hisashi's handwriting danced before his eyes. Softness isn't weakness. It's proof you didn't become the people who hurt you. The realization hit him like a jolt. These words fluttered against his heart, a gentle reminder that the path he walked was not one of vengeance, not one of becoming the oppressor. Instead, he was forging his own identity, a new kind of strength interwoven with compassion. Later that week, an unexpected ripple coursed through the digital world. A video leaked, suddenly flooding screens across the city. No faces. Just shadows moving with purpose. A boy in a green hoodie, hovering protectively over a child, handing his coat with an earnestness that spoke volumes. There was no violence, no names uttered, as if the moment itself had transcended the messiness of identity to capture something pure. The post was succinct, yet haunting, the vigilante that doesn't kill. The one who bleeds quietly. He's real. Izuku felt his breath hitching as he absorbed it all. The image of him, cloaked in shadows, intertwined with his truth. Yet years down the road, it stirred something he hadn't anticipated, an amalgamation of fear and pride, tightly woven together. The Commission, with their dilapidated hierarchy, filed the leak under urban myth. But the morning met them with 3 new reports that showed up, itching to break the careful wall built around them. All kids. All safe. All whispering the same name, Spine. And all around him, the world began to change. The next morning, the news ran a quiet story. One never officially released. Never verified. Just whispered. 6 found unconscious on the Sector 3 skybridge. No witnesses. No injuries consistent with typical stun or impact. Suspected quirk involvement. And at the bottom, could it be Spine? Or someone worse? We told you. You can't kill a ghost. Chapter 7, The Names We Burned. The cold was different tonight. It wrapped around the buildings like a delicate shroud, leaving a chill that was not sharp or bitter. There was a certain stillness in the air, as though the entire city had fallen asleep, leaving behind a fragile tranquility that could be shattered with the slightest disturbance. This was the kind of cold that made the streets feel hollow and the sky oppressive, pressing down like a weight that made Izuku's skin feel thin and translucent, like a shadow flitting through the night, veiled in uncertainty yet imbued with a persistent, heavy presence. He hadn't meant to be out this long. He had promised himself a quick perimeter run, just 5 blocks, routine, the kind of habit that kept him grounded. The streets had become more familiar than his own reflection in the mirror, the jagged edges and dimly lit alleyways a second home. But somewhere around the 4th alley and the 3rd set of 2 silent windows, the world had shifted, and he had forgotten to turn back. His thoughts had drifted, absorbed by the layers of silence that enveloped the night, enthralled by the shadows dancing just beyond reach. Now, he crouched on the ledge of a rooftop, breath barely escaping through his teeth, his knuckles raw and aching from the cold and the tension that had wound itself around his chest. The dampness of his coat clung to him like a familiar specter, a reminder of the warehouse incident from 2 nights ago, a place crowded with echoes of conflicts past and fears unrelenting. He hadn't dried the coat, he hadn't wanted to. The weight felt good, grounding him as if something was still touching him, tethering him to the shrouded thoughts that spun through his mind. Merging with instinct and memory, he felt time drift like the delicate specters of fog rising from the streets below. Shadows glided across brick walls, painted with a surreal brush of night. The city was alive, and yet, it felt profoundly still. Beneath him, the pavement glistened with melting frost, a reflection of both the cold night and the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. Below, the night had shifted once again. A fight had just erupted, an explosion of chaos erupting through the stillness, a cacophony of grunts and shouts that seemed so out of place in this quiet, heavy air. 3 figures moved in the darkness, shadows that flickered like flames in the night. 2 crumpled to the ground, groaning in pain, the kind of sounds that gnawed at the edges of Izuku's resolve. The 3rd limped away, one arm cradled protectively against his chest, curses spilling from his lips like venom, as if the night and all its mysteries had conspired against him. Izuku had waited until it was over. Not out of fear, fear was a well-trodden path he avoided when he could. Instead, it was a conscious decision, a recognition that he didn't want to become the 4th participant in this unfortunate tableau. He turned away, pulling his hood lower to shield himself from the wind that tugged at him insistently, as if it wished to pluck him away and let him vanish into the shadows. Time flowed unevenly in this half-darkness. Seconds melted into moments, and moments slipped away into silence. He closed his eyes and let the world fade into a muted haze, allowing himself to merge with the stillness around him. Thoughts swirled unbidden, memories layered like the fog that settled over the city, reminding him of the weight he carried, the burden of expectations, the echoes of doubt that lingered like unwelcome guests. Aizawa found him just before sunrise, emerging from the shadows like a specter of his own, a figure shrouded in mystery and quiet authority. He didn't yell or admonish, there was no judgment in his gaze, just a serene acceptance. Instead, he dropped down beside Izuku on the ledge, a presence that felt both relieving and grounding amid the enveloping weight of the night. They sat in silence, their breaths mingling with the chilled air, 2 bodies aligned yet distinctly separate, parallel lives woven together by shared burdens and unspoken words. "I thought you weren't coming back," Aizawa said softly, the rasp of his voice breaking the stillness, filling the void between them. "I didn't think I left," Izuku replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your body did. Your mind stayed behind," Aizawa noted, his observation cutting through the fog of Izuku's thoughts. Izuku nodded, not willing to give away the full weight of the truth hidden within that response. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a denial either. The words existed in a gray area of acceptance, one that felt too heavy to name. "You scared Mike." "He was going to search the city," Aizawa said, and Izuku felt the familiar tightening in his throat, a constriction that echoed the unworthiness he struggled to shake off. "I didn't mean to," Izuku responded, guilt seeping through each syllable. "I know," came the quiet reply. Silence settled back between them, heavy and palpable, wrapping around them like a familiar cloak. Moments passed, the city outside shifting and stirring as the sun approached, the world waking up but still encased in the silence cultivated during the long hours of the night. Then, so soft it felt borrowed, an admission tumbled forth from Izuku's lips: "I didn't know how to come back without breaking something." Aizawa drew in a breath, the weight of Izuku's confession hanging in the air like a delicate thread, one that seemed to bind them closer together and yet pull them apart, fraught with tension and understanding. In that moment, Izuku saw Aizawa, their shared struggles, their common determination, the history that bound them and the hope that flickered like a candle in a tumultuous storm. Aizawa pulled a scarf from his coat, not the hero one that spoke of valor and courage but another, softer and faded. It was one worn on long, cold nights, threads old and frayed, infused with the essence of countless moments spent contemplating the fragility of life. He handed it over, a simple act rife with meaning. Izuku stared at the fabric, momentarily frozen in place, caught between hesitation and instinct. He looked up, searching Aizawa's eyes for some unspoken understanding. "Hold it," Aizawa said, a command woven with gentle urgency. "Don't do anything else. Just hold it." Izuku obeyed, wrapping the scarf around his hands as if it were a lifeline sent to anchor him to something steady, a piece of warmth amidst the relentless chill of the world. For the first time in days, his hands stopped shaking, that raw anxiety giving way to a calm he had almost forgotten existed. When they returned to the apartment, there was a heaviness lingering in the air, palpable and thick, yet Hisashi didn't speak as they crossed the threshold. He simply pulled Izuku into a one-armed hug that felt like a protective shield, allowing Izuku to melt into the solace offered in that moment. "Took my mic offline worrying about you," Hisashi said, and the concern in his voice was palpable, designed from the fabric of endless sleepless nights spent worrying, searching for a friend tucked away under layers of darkness and silence. Izuku felt a swell of emotion rise within him. He didn't know how to say "I'm sorry" without making it worse. So instead, he leaned into the embrace, finding comfort in the connection, the warmth of friendship that refused to let him slide into the depths alone. That afternoon, as the sky above shifted and the sunlight filtered cautiously through the barely open curtains, someone unexpected showed up. Hitoshi. He didn't knock, he simply texted once. "Front door. Don't ask how I knew. Let me up." Surprised, Izuku let him in, the familiar yet unexpected presence filling the room with a sense of something unspoken, something potent. Hitoshi stood in the living room, hands shoved into pockets, his mouth working like he had 5 versions of the same sentence battling for depths in his throat. In the space that followed, an electric tension created a bubble of anticipation. "You're really spine," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Izuku didn't deny it. He had resigned to his fragmented identity, lost between the person he wished he could be and the reputation he had unwittingly carved out for himself. Hitoshi laughed once, rough, half-sick, a sound that barely echoed the punch of joy. It spoke instead of wonder tinged with the rawness of reality. "Holy SHT, he continued, his expression shifting as he walked to the window, gazing out into the cityscape sprawled across the horizon, the sun beginning to set the buildings ablaze with a soft, golden light. "Do they know?" "Who?" Izuku leaned against the doorframe, aware of every fragment of silence that lingered between them. "Everyone. UA. The Commission. The old classes." Hitoshi's voice held a weight of urgency and curiosity, a demand for truth wrapped in the layers of concern that filtered through their shared experiences. Izuku didn't answer. He remained caught in the whirlwind of uncertainty, the questions echoing in his mind as he felt the past creeping into their conversation, a rich tapestry of shared struggles, of the alliance forged through trials and heartache. "You're the ghost that won't stay dead," Hitoshi said finally, his voice a low murmur filled with awe. It didn't sound like an accusation, instead, it resonated with an understanding, a shared acknowledgement of the battles they had fought, the silence surrounding them too fragile to disturb. Later, when Hitoshi finally left, he touched Izuku's shoulder, a silent affirmation of empathy and solidarity, and murmured, "People like us, we don't howl because we're animals. We howl because no one heard us scream." Izuku felt the weight of those words settle heavily on his chest, a truth too profound to diminish. It followed him, wrapped around him like an echo in the night, reminding him that they were not alone in their struggles, that their voices, however muted, could still carry a resonance through the darkness. That night, sleep eluded him once again. He watched the city instead, the skyline etched against a canvas of stars, the twinkling lights flickered like distant whispers of dreams and hopes, that realm of possibilities just out of reach. He listened to the wind as it threaded through the streets, carrying secrets on its breath, a lullaby cradling the restless spirits of the city. And when the wind rose high enough, it began to weave a song, one that pulled at the corners of his heart as he heard it. A low, echoing sound reverberated through the night. Not the wind, he realized, but something more profound, something primal. Not a song, but a howl, long and cracked, a human in its desolate beauty. Somewhere, within the labyrinthine depths of the city, someone was calling for him. And this time, elements within him stirred, awakened alongside a newfound clarity, he was ready to answer. He climbed to the rooftop, the wind whipping through his hair, wrapping him in a shroud of exquisite freedom. Beneath the stars, the city buzzed with life, a reminder that he was alive, that he mattered, and that in the heart of the night, in the stillness of the air, voices could be heard. The call echoed again, piercing through the quiet, urging him forward. In that moment, Izuku understood the path ahead was not merely a journey of survival, it was an invitation to rise, to embrace the shadows, to listen to the howling winds, and to reclaim his place in the world that awaited him. In the depths of the night, amidst the whispers of the city, he was no longer a shadow, he was a force ready to reclaim his voice and shine within the echoes of the dark. With a deep breath, Izuku stepped forward, a sense of resolve surging through his veins as he cast aside fear, finding his footing within the intricate web of existence that stretched before him. The wind sang, the city stirred, and he was alive, no longer bound by the specters of doubt but propelled by the fierce determination to answer the call, to let his howl rise through the night. Somewhere, someone was calling for him. And this time, he was ready to answer. Chapter 8, The Child the System Forgot. It starts with a letter. A real one. Paper. White. Crisp to the touch, each edge clean and precise, almost as if it were waiting for something profound to be inscribed upon it. The envelope has no return address, an anonymity that fills the air with a sense of foreboding. Just his name in the center, Izuku Midoriya, written in careful, deliberate handwriting that isn't familiar to him, but carries the gravitas of something unmistakably government-trained. There is a practiced precision in the letters, something formal and clinical, sending an instant jolt through him. He finds it nestled within the mailbox, hidden beneath a pile of takeout menus and a brightly colored flyer for a Hero Internship Expo he never received an invitation to, a bitter reminder of his status. It's a stark contrast, the glossy paper of the Expo flyer promising possibility and excitement, and the lonely, stark letter beneath it. Curiosity prickles at his nerves as he carefully extracts the letter, opening it alone in the muted light of his home, a solitary act filled with silent anticipation. Inside is a folded card, thick stock with a substantial weight that hints at the importance of its contents. The off-white color is bland, almost mundane, yet striking with purpose. At the top, the commission seal is embossed in silver, catching the light and gleaming with authority. Provisional re-entry. The words leap out at him, bold and commanding, demanding his attention. He reads further, allowing the implications of the message to wash over him. We are pleased to inform you that your eligibility for quirkless rehabilitation and reclassification has been reviewed. Your case is considered exceptional. Pending guardian consent, we would like to offer you a position in the hero support pilot path at UA High School. As he goes deeper into the contents, he finds more buzzwords, terms meant to inspire or impress. Words and phrases like hero adjacent, special circumstances, and exceptional situational experience orbit in his mind. But instead of excitement, a weight settles in his chest. This doesn't feel like an invitation, it feels like a collar being fastened around his neck, a leash that binds him, claiming him not as he is, but as a commodity. Izuku reads it twice, each pass making the knot in his stomach tighten. A sense of dread fills the space around him as he drops the letter onto the kitchen table, the parchment crinkling softly against the wood, a sound too loud in the heavy silence. He walks out of the room, movement mechanical as if his body is responding to a command far removed from his own heart's desires. Aizawa finds it 15 minutes later. He stumbles upon the letter lying there, stark against the table like a bomb waiting to go off. He reads it once, quickly, his brow furrowing as he absorbs the implications, each word unfolding like a flower of despair. Then, he closes his eyes, as if by doing so, he might be able to keep something hidden behind them, perhaps the anxiety stirring within or the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. When Izuku comes back, Aizawa is still seated, tension radiating from him as the letter sits before him like a landmine. "They want to use you," he says, voice low, grounding the statement in a somber truth. Izuku leans against the doorframe, his arms folded across his chest, his expression inscrutable, a mask of silence that reveals nothing of the storm inside him. "They want to parade you," Aizawa continues, an edge of vehemence creeping into his voice. Izuku remains resolutely quiet, not willing to give air to the tumultuous thoughts that swirl in his mind. Aizawa looks up, his gaze piercing, seeking an acknowledgement. "They didn't want you when you were 13, Aizawa insists, his voice steady, uncovering wounds he knows still bleed for Izuku. "I wasn't useful then," Izuku murmurs, a hint of a defensive edge creeping into his tone as he attempts to shield himself from the memories that haunt him. A pause follows, pregnant with the weight of their shared history. "You're not useful now," Aizawa asserts, his intensity unwavering. "You're valuable. That's worse." The truth of those words hangs in the air, both men knowing the implications. They don't discuss it again that night, the gravity of the situation too heavy to bear. The silence between them hums with an electric tension, not rooted in anger but grounded in the deep-seated fear of what it all means for Izuku, for their fragile existence together. The next morning, the doorbell rings. It interrupts their morning routine, shattering the fragile silence that has settled in the house. Not the buzzer that they were accustomed to, but the real doorbell, a sound that signifies the presence of someone unexpected and close enough to know exactly where to press. Hisashi answers the door before Aizawa even has a chance to react, his cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the tense ambience. Standing on the threshold is a tall figure, elegant yet intimidating. She dons thin-rimmed glasses that accentuate a sharp gaze, and her smile strikes Izuku as overly polite, lacking the warmth he craves. It doesn't reach her eyes, leaving an unsettling chill in the air. She's from the commission, that much is abundantly clear. Yet she doesn't introduce herself, a formality discarded like an unwanted cloak. Instead, her eyes glide around the room, surveying the familiar surroundings as if she already knows the details by heart. "We wanted to make the offer in person," she states matter-of-factly, and her eyes settle on Izuku, almost as if he's a lost pet that wandered back home, and she's here to reclaim him. "No," Aizawa interjects promptly, his tone firm enough to cut through the atmosphere like a knife. Yet the woman doesn't turn to him, her focus unwaveringly directed at Izuku as if he is the only one present. "I think your future deserves to be your decision," she proposes, her voice smooth but containing underlying currents of persuasion. "Don't you?" Izuku stands frozen in place, every fiber of his being caught in a web of uncertainty. He doesn't move, he doesn't nod or shake his head, he simply finds the strength to voice the question that has plagued him ever since the contents of the letter seeped into his consciousness. "Why now?" he asks, his voice steady, holding back the floodgates of emotion. The woman doesn't blink. Her expression remains unreadable. "We were wrong," she replies, her words hanging in the air like a fragile truce. Izuku manages a smile, but it's cold and distant, far from the joy or warmth he should feel. "No. You just lost track of me," he counters, the bitter truth lacing his tone. She chooses to say nothing, and her silence is a concession, an acknowledgement of the ache that propels him forward. Before she leaves, she hands him a folder, a weighty promise nestled in his palm. Inside is a reprint of his long-deleted academic file, the bureaucratic remnants of a life he tried so hard to reclaim. His name sits at the top, followed by a photograph that seems like a distant memory. Age, 13. Status, quirkless. High intelligence. Unsuitable for hero track. Each detail revealed like an open wound, lingering like an unforgotten ghost. In Dming red ink, the final line reads, "No projection." Izuku doesn't go after her, he doesn't chase after the truth she embodies. Instead, he keeps the file, grappling not to hold it tightly, but to remember the journey he has traveled, the struggles intertwined in the fabric of his existence. The next day, Aizawa takes him to the ruins of Aldera Middle School. They traverse the decaying remnants of what was once a thriving institution for hope and growth. The building has been condemned for 3 years now, its walls scarred by too much damage and too little funding to restore what was lost. They walk the halls together, each step reverberating with memories that claw at Izuku's heart, relentless in their insistence to resurface. As they explore, he notices the faded posters plastered on the walls, remnants of old events celebrating youthful dreams. He feels a twisting in his gut seeing his old classroom, the door ajar, almost beckoning him to cross the threshold one last time. His gaze settles on a desk, and a wave of nostalgia washes over him. His name is etched into the surface, twice, once by himself, and the other by someone else's hand, inscribed with a venomous depth he remembers all too well. Different handwriting, filled with familiar fury, catches his attention. "Die quirkless freak." The words etched into the wood burn into his mind, pulling at buried memories. He doesn't cry, instead, he leans heavily against the desk, taking in the tenderness of the moment even as the pain reverberates throughout his core. Aizawa watches, his expression hardening. "Everything they broke, they want to wear now like a badge," he says, his voice steady, resonating with quiet rage and palpable disappointment in the system they must navigate. Izuku exhales exhaustion, replying, "They don't want me." The bitter taste of truth has settled in his heart, heavy and unyielding. "They want your story," Aizawa clarifies, and the unshakable understanding resonates between them. The next day, the commission sends another envelope. This time, it carries an unusual sense of finality and urgency. Izuku feels an overwhelming sense of dread as he opens it, revealing a past that could alter the course of his life. It reads you, temporary access ID, guest. Support path. He studies it closely, the weight of his potential future heavy in his hand. He doesn't wear it, instead, he holds it tightly, staring at the words, measuring the significance they carry against the backdrop of his uncertain future. He shows up on a Friday, compelled by a mixture of defiance and seeking grounding, he does so unannounced. This time, he is not alone, Aizawa stands resolutely by his side, his quiet strength anchoring Izuku momentarily. They step through the gates of U.A. High School in a profound silence, navigating past new students filled with buzzing energy and old teachers caught off guard. The atmosphere is overwhelmingly different than the one he remembers, vibrating with hope and aspirations yet untouched. Suddenly, a voice slices through the air, low and astounded. "Midoriya." It is Katsuki, standing outside Training Dome C, taller and stronger now, but his voice hasn't changed. The familiar cadence remains, rings of his confusion clear, unmasked by their past rivalries. Time seems to stretch as Izuku stops in his tracks, the world around him fading momentarily as their eyes lock, both of them caught in a moment akin to startled specters confronting one another on neutral ground. Then, the silence is broken. "I thought," Katsuki starts, words failing him momentarily as uncertainty dances across his features. Yeah, Izuku responds, equal parts wary and familiar. I didn't know you were, I wasn't, Izuku finishes for him, the echo of the past weighing heavily on his shoulders. A heavy silence settles between them, trapping old sentiments in its grasp, thickening the atmosphere with shared history. Then, Katsuki takes a step closer, an uncharacteristic move that draws their connection anew. You're the one they're talking about. Spine, he observes, his voice low, almost reverent. Izuku doesn't flinch, his gaze remains steady as he responds, they're not wrong. The words hang heavy, thrumming with truth. Katsuki nods once, slow and deliberate, the weight of understanding weaving into the fabric of their connection. Then, almost hesitant, he adds in a whisper, you look like someone who forgot how to be touched. Izuku feels the weight of those words lodge deeply in his throat. He doesn't answer because, in that moment, he knows it's true, more true than he'd like to admit. Inside, they meet with Principal Nizu. The environment has shifted, charged with the energy of potential and unspoken weight. The meeting is polite yet brutally short, laced with tension that echoes in the walls. Principal Nizu doesn't disguise the knowledge he possesses, there is no pretense of offering apologies for the situation unraveling before them. Instead, he lays out options before Izuku. Izuku can enroll, he can take the path of shadow track, consider hero support, or even venture into public relations. Every option presented seems to shimmer against his innate yearning to truly belong, revealing a fate that would brand him not a fighter but merely a figurehead. The commission tied Nizu's hands in a knot that even he was unable to break. The apology in his beady eyes showed that much. With a heart heavy with conviction, Izuku declines, his voice steady against the silence that envelopes them. For a moment, Izuku sees relief in Nizu's eyes. Almost thanking him for going against the commission. Izuku knows that if Nizu wants him at UA, then he will find a way. When they leave, as Izuku steps through the doors, he casts the guest pass into the bin outside the entry gates, a decisive act of rejection against the expectations being moved upon him by the commission and the system that well and truly failed him. Katsuki watches him do it, but he doesn't stop him. Instead, he falls into step beside him, walking with him the entire way to the station. There are no questions, no demands, just a companionable silence and the understanding that binds them. As they reach the curb, Izuku stumbles slightly, his balance momentarily slipping. In response, Katsuki catches his elbow, the gesture fleeting but loaded with significance, just for a brief moment, their worlds touch. Izuku stares at the spot where Katsuki's hand made contact, almost as if it burned, but not in a painful way. It didn't burn at all, and that scares him more than the memories clawing at his heart. That night, Izuku dreams of the file. Not the new one. The first one. The one that laid bare all his vulnerabilities and failures. The one that said, no projection. No potential. Not worth the ink. And he dreams of setting it on fire.